listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay, welcome to a very special edition of the Opperman Report on Sunday afternoon. Normally we do our show every Friday evening at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Ed Opperman. I'm a private investigator, a digital forensic investigator, and I have a blog called the Opperman Report. Now, the reason why we're doing this show today on Sunday afternoon, it's a very special edition of the Opperman Report with our guests, Jim Fetzer, Ole Demagard, and hopefully Mayor Jim Rothstein, who's the NYPD detective retired who arrested Frank Sturgis. We're having a little trouble getting Detective Rothstein on the phone, but I'm sure we'll get him by the end of the show. It's going to be a 3-hour show today. Now, the reason why we're doing this show is that Mr. Fetzer and Mr. Demagard have received some credible death threats this week, not in the past couple of weeks, relating to their investigation of what they claim is recent history's most prolific serial killers. And these two men have killed over 1,000 people, and they've been used as hired assassins in many political murders, both here and abroad, including John Lennon, JFK, RFK, and all these big crimes. And there's even a connection to a bank robbery gang in Canada, and just incredible information. So I was first contacted by Lorian Fenton, who had Jim Fetzer on Monday night, and she was concerned about his safety. And then I was contacted a couple of days later by Ole Demagard, who I've known. I've had him on the show before, so I was concerned enough to ask Nighthawk to give us this time on Sunday to do a produced 3-hour show. We're also going to have recorded telephone conversations between Mr. Fetzer and this witness, who I believe has the nickname Agent Ladybug, that they've known him quite a long time. And you can hear, I've heard the conversations, and you can hear this stuff, and you can hear that these are, to me, appear to be very serious, credible threats. So why don't everybody go around real quick and introduce themselves, and then we'll have you guys get into this story. Mr. Fetzer first.
Well, thanks, Ed. I'm a former Marine Corps officer, a retired university professor, a radio talk show host since my retirement. I've been devoting myself to the complex and controversial issues that most, none of the national media will touch, especially JFK, 9/11, the plane crash that took the life of Senator Paul Wellstone, more recently Sandy Hook and the Boston bombing, and where you can find my interviews, my radio show interviews about this on radiofetzer.blogspot.com, and where I have over 772-hour interviews on subjects like these. And most recently, you'll find the interview with Ole Demagard from Monday, in which we discuss this very topic we're going to be addressing today. And also on Veterans Today, if you just do a search on Veterans Today, Jim Fetzer, you'll find a link that takes you to my archives where I have 70 or 80 articles about these topics. And well, I'm very grateful to Ole for having invested a huge amount of time and effort in going through the massive conversations I've had with this woman whose name is Haley Otis. She was known as Agent Ladybug when she was co-hosting a show, Cloak and Dagger, years back. In fact, I was interviewed on that show a long time ago, but, several years ago, she made contact with me and we began having conversations, and they were so important that I began recording them. And I don't know, Ole's estimated there's 100 hours. But the fact of the matter is that after I went to Santa Barbara, where I chaired a conference for the 50th observance of the assassination of JFK, which was, of course, on the 22nd of November. I was supposed to speak to her the following Sunday, which would be the 24th, but I called her and told her that I would reach her tomorrow. And when I tried to reach her on the 25th, I was unable to get her. And for 3 months, we had no contact at all, which led me to infer that she'd probably, they probably caught up with her because her life has been in jeopardy for many, many years. And as you'll learn and as we'll discuss, she's frequently greeted by those who know her in and around Toronto, in the police force and elsewhere. Haley, I can't believe you're still alive. So you'll find that when she called me two weeks ago, last Friday, which I believe, therefore, was the 21st of February, I was really floored, and even more so by what she had to say, because she essentially was telling me that I'm a dead man, and that and the reason is because when I thought she was dead back on the 20th of December 2012. I made extreme efforts to contact the Toronto Police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. She'd given me a lot of information about this gang, which includes not only serial killers but bank robbers, if everything she's told me is correct. Also, the FBI, therefore, since they're responsible for bank robberies. And I published an article then entitled "Bank Robbers and Serial Killers. The CIA hires them, the FBI ignores them." And if anyone who is listening to this program really ought to go there, Bank Robbers and Serial Killers, which I published on Veterans Today. I also put a copy of it inside my radio blog, even though that's atypical. I don't normally do that. And you'll get a huge amount of background and photographs and so forth about all of these events I'm discussing. But where I found a complete and utter failure of even the FBI to raise the least digit for bank robberies, many of which were occurring even in the United States as well as in Canada, and where, Haley has identified the participants in the bank robbers, the one key player being a fellow named Clyde Forshaw, and we'll go into his many accomplishments as a criminal, some kind of mastermind, and we're Ole and I will address the fact that two of these men appear to be perhaps the greatest serial killers in history. But that's the background. I published the article on the 21st of December. You can find it there. And,
well, James, you can also find that article. I have it on my blog as well, the link to your Veterans Today article, and it's on the Opperman Report blog as well. But before we get too far into this story, because I got a million questions for you already, let's have Ole Demogard introduce himself and maybe give a little description of your involvement in this story as well, Ole.
Okay, my name is, like you say, Ole Demogard, and I'm a Swedish researcher who's been spending almost 30 years doing my absolute utmost to reveal what has been going on in the world, the real truth behind many of the major conspiracies and assassinations like JFK, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, 9/11, Oklahoma City. I mean, all of these, including the assassination of the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme in 1986. And one of the things that this very deep research has led to is that I found that there are very hard proof of the same group of assassins being used in most, if not all, of these different attacks. And this research gave me the great pleasure of getting in touch with Jim Fetzer here about, a year ago or something like that. And while I was on his show and we became good friends. And then one day he started sharing these phone calls, these recorded phone calls that he had with Haley Otis, asking my advice because, like I mentioned, I've spent so many years looking into the JFK assassination and so on. And what she was explaining was just absolutely mind-blowing. The information, the depth of details and the unknown details that I've never heard of, even though I spent so many years. And there were so many questions that I had over the years on certain areas in these assassinations. For instance, who cleaned up after these assassinations? Who was the one arranging for all these so-called suicides, accidents, murders and so on, of witnesses and so that has followed the JFK and many other assassinations and so on. And she supplied incredible information about these things and so much more well, Jim and I really started looking into this. He sent me all of these recorded calls, and I spread them out. As soon as I got them, I just spread them out to lots of different sources around the globe, just so that they would be protected if something should happen to James or myself or anything like that, so that the information would still be available. And even though what she says to start with sounds totally incredible, I must say, after listening through all of these hours, I mean, I don't know how many times I listened through it, I find her extremely credible. Not always the way the conclusions she makes of some things, but the details that she supplies and the experiences she's had herself together with these people, absolutely mind-blowing. And I must say I honor her as an incredibly brave woman that have been able to stand up and try to reveal this for such a long time.
I'd just like to make a disclaimer here, okay? And that because we're going to be naming names, okay, and we already have. So if any opinions that I have are my own opinions, I'm responsible for what I say, and it's not necessarily the opinion of the station. The same goes for James Fetzer and Ole Damagard. Any opinions they have may not necessarily be my opinion or their opinion or the station's opinion, or anybody else involved in the show. And also, anybody we name today, they are welcome to come on the show and give their side of the story, give their version of events if they disagree with something. So we just like to make that out there. And also remind everybody that Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, is a listener-sponsored station. We have no corporate sponsorships. So if you like this kind of work we're trying to get out here and do for you, some of us at threats of their life, you got to support the station. You got to visit freedomslips.com and click on the donate button. Okay, now I got a question right away. Okay, now it seems like this story originates from this woman, Haley Otis, who was Ladybug, Agent Ladybug. How did you guys, I guess James first came into contact with her. How did you first come into contact with this woman? Did she contact you? Did you contact her?
Well, it turns out that although I didn't realize it at the time, I was invited to come on the show Cloak and Dagger, and she was a co-host. I mean, it didn't register particularly at the time, but that I did an interview on Cloak and Dagger, and if I had to guess, it was quite a while ago. I mean, more than 5 or 6 years ago at least. But that relatively more recently, and as best I can recall, 2008, I could check my files to see what's the earliest file I have recorded. She contacted me and said she had important information she wanted to share with me. And I after my first conversation with her, I was sufficiently overwhelmed. I mean, when Ole talks about the specificity and detail of her recollection, I mean, the woman is phenomenal. We have talked so many different times, and she can go back and forth, dates, names, specifics, details, how crimes were committed, who committed them, exactly how they were done. I mean, it just has astonished me. I think she has a photographic memory. I think she is probably the most important witness for a host of crimes the world has ever known. And yet it appears equally obvious to me that no one is making any effort to protect her, and that the Toronto police know very well about the crimes that are being committed and who's committing these crimes, some of which involve a public conveyance because Clyde Forshaw has served as a conductor on a public trolley line, and he's actually murdered some of those who were passengers on his trolley. In one case in particular, when they saw something they weren't supposed to see, these were 2 teenage girls. Haley has described these crimes in great detail because Clyde, with whom she grew up, I mean, she first witnessed him commit a murder when he was about 12 years old by stomping on a little boy until he suffocated. The little boy, as I recall, was about 10 years old. And she witnessed that. She's witnessed many other crimes he has committed. But he's also made it his regular practice to reveal to her the very specific details of the crimes he's committed and in which he has been involved, including the assassination of JFK. Now, I have, like Ole, done a tremendous amount of work on JFK. I've recently published an article in which I identify 6 of the shooters, one of whom is a Dallas deputy sheriff, one of whom is a former Air Force expert, one of whom is a Dallas police officer, one of whom is a CIA mob guy, one of whom is an Ina Castro Cuban, another of whom is Lyndon Johnson's personal hitman. But I've always known in the back of my mind that there was a possibility of yet one more shooter in the vicinity of the grassy knoll. And if what Haley is telling us, that person actually was Clyde Forshaw. And Ole can confirm from his own research his views about this. But not only if what Haley is telling me is correct, was he involved in the JFK, but also in the death of Bobby. They have a cousin by the name of Walter Tabinski who was involved in JFK and also Martin Luther King. And then Clyde and one of his sons appeared to have set up John John's plane to be blown out of the sky by loading it with superfrac or C4 high explosives. So, I mean, it's a stunning, stunning story. And, the American people deserve to know. Now, after we hear the first conversation, which is my most recent, and which Haley declared would be our last, I'll explain why I have finally resolved to go forward with this. Ole and I had several conversations about it and decided it was the right thing to do, and I'll explain exactly why after everyone has that opportunity. But Ed, you might ask Ole for some further confirmation of what I've just said, because he's listened to all of these conversations himself.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions for Ole. Ole, have you heard the name Clyde Forshaw before this came out?
Never before I started talking to Jim about Haley, and so these were totally unknown names for me. But the people that are pointed out in the different positions where Haley claims they were, I've been very aware of these different people involved, but I've never been able to identify them. And so when she came forward with these identities, also claiming that Walter Tabinski was not only part of the assassination in Dealey Plaza, but that he was also the guy that was photographed outside the Cuban and Russian embassy in Mexico City, pretending to be Oswald before the JFK assassination. Suddenly everything started falling into place, and also she identified him on photos from the Civil Air Patrol where Oswald and David Ferry and other people that later were part of the assassination. So if you see the pattern, they go very much hand in hand through these different big political events.
Okay, but it's all going back to Haley Otis. Now, how does she have this information? How does she know these people?
She grew up with them, Ed. She grew up with them. She grew up with them. She was virtually a member of the family. In fact, Clyde normally refers to Haley as a part of the family, and it seems to be part of his reason for in confiding in her all these details. Now, if you listen to all these conversations, it's something she explains many different times, but she grew up with them, Ed. She grew up with them.
Okay, so she grew up them as a child, like as teenagers, they grew up together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I tell you, she witnessed Clyde's first murder when Clyde was about 12, and I think she may have been 10 years old when she witnessed his first murder.
Okay, where did they live?
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's most of these occurred in Toronto.
Okay, gotcha.
But he's committed crimes all over the world, including right here in Madison, as you're going to hear when we play the first conversation.
But also it's important to point out that there were 3 people that were working together, and one of them were Haley's brother, Roland Otis. So he was involved in the JFK assassination as well as a driver, and also in the Martin Luther King assassination. And according to Haley's claim, he is the one that is called Raul. If that is true or not, but I don't know. But it fits in a lot of different places, what she says.
His name was Roland, but she gave him, he didn't like Roland. He didn't like Raleigh. So Haley explained that she made up a name for him, a nickname for him, Raoul. And everyone who is familiar with the assassination of Martin Luther King is familiar with the fact that there was somebody named Raoul who was involved in this, a bit of a shadowy presence, but it appears, if what Haley tells us is correct, that it was her brother.
Has anybody tried to independently confirm what Haley claims, like by contacting these people, the names that she names, by contacting them?
Ed, yeah, right. We're just going to call up and say, are you a serial killer? Did you participate in shooting JFK? I mean, give us a break, Ed, you know. There's a lot of indirect confirmation from what she identifies in photos and books and so forth. But why don't we begin with that that last phone conversation I had with her? But because I think it's very important for understanding the situation we're in as we talk today.
Okay, so James, you want us to actually play that conversation right now?
Jerry's all set with it.
Okay, go ahead, Jerry.
Now, let me preface it with the observation that when she called me this time, she told me someone had just taken a shot at her as she was getting on a bus. And then I told her I'd call her, and this is what followed.
Honest to God.
Getting back to what I was saying.
Honest, back up a minute. I say, honest to God, I thought you were dead.
This is how serious it is, so you know what you're dealing with. James Cobblestone said, I've looked up, I saw the email, right, that was sent to you. I haven't seen that Fetzer is alive, or something like that, it says there, from James Cobblestone. I've looked up, there's a person by the name of James Fetzer, and I found that he isn't alive, indirectly saying you're a dead man. Look at that, you understand how serious these people are. Within 3 weeks, right where Clyde lives, a guy was shot through the windshield on the driver's side, about 4 blocks from where Clyde's house is. He's using the other car, which is a Honda, and it's a 2-door, minus the seat in the back. That's where he puts his cadavers in. A silver Hyundai is what he normally drives, and that was a Honda. That was in about a week and a half ago, or a week ago. Within that same week, where Clyde's oldest son was working on a restaurant called Wildfire, a Chinese guy or Oriental was shot right on Yonge Street, the main drag, and all the cops said it was a brazen killing. And what did they see? A guy with blonde hair. That was Alfred, right? It's either Alfred or Clyde Jr. with spiked blonde hair with a hoodie. Right in, I can't even come out of my house. Do you understand? So you understand the severity of it.
What?
Clyde and his son, or his cousin, WalterTabinski, when they went to Winnipeg all the time to see this old grandmother and the whole clan, because they have part of the clan in Winnipeg, when I was saying to you why it's so important of who the Tabinskis are, where they live. One of the daughters, if you take a look on Facebook, her hobby is the AR, what do you call it, 12 or 15 rifle? Now, why would a girl...
Oh, AR-15, AR-15.
Huh?
AR-15.
Why would that be her specialty? That's Tabinski's one of the daughters. Anyway, so you understand. As they were going through from Detroit from Detroit into Illinois and in through Wisconsin, they did the capital city murders. Do you get my drift? They did. I told you one time, Clyde said that he wanted to kill the whole Percy family. Valerie Percy, okay, the senator's daughter. She was killed, Clyde said he killed her with a pinball, pinball hammer. And remember I told you I was chased up and down the whole house where we lived on 45 with Marlborough with a bayonet.
Why was he
killed
after?
With a bayonet.
Why was he after Senator?
They ordered the senator. The orders came from Nixon.
From Nixon?
He didn't want to go. Yeah, he did not want to go into. He did not want to go into Vietnam. Senator Percy. He was against what Nixon wanted, and he was on Nixon's enemy list. So that's why the whole family was going to be killed. But if it hadn't been for the mother, Clyde said that he shone the flashlight right in her face, but she was able to see what he looked like. And what was the description? Short with a ruddy complexion. Need I say any more? No one gets my drift. He also did Linda Bricca, Gerald Bricca, and Deborah Bricca. They've linked the Percy case and the Bricca case. He also did the Robson killing, right? These are books. You have to ask yourself one hard question. I didn't like that you started getting into an antagonistic situation with Michael Collins Piper. Remember I told you I was looking up Find a Grave? Well, all the victims from the Sandy Hook are on Find a Grave. Like, what if they're dead? What if the government knows that someone like Clyde did it? They've linked the Zodiac to the Bricca murder. Look it up on the internet. Linda Bricca, Gerald Bricca, Deborah Bricca, Zodiac. They're trying to pin it on a Ted.
Haley, no children died at Sandy Hook. They didn't. I'm telling you, they didn't.
Okay, but what if they did?
The whole thing was a fraud. It was a fraud. They had 26 Christmas trees behind the fireplace the day before. 26 Christmas trees they brought out on the 15th and decorated for the 26 victims. It was in the works for 2.5 years.
Well, whatever it is, all I know is he was part of Operation Chaos. He talked about it in the confession there.
Well, what's the story about Piper? Piper is just an app.
Okay, maybe. All right, maybe. Okay, maybe someone was killed. Maybe Adam Lanza was set up. Okay, maybe something happened. Maybe the government, the FBI, put a 50-year ban to it, the same as they did to Kennedy, because they know the same person did it. In 1970, the police already knew who the Zodiac was. Why did this LAPD cop want to get, the confession or the hitman that he went looking for all around the world? Easy enough. You just look at a friggin' phone number in the phone book, and there he is. All you have to have is the name, which I did, because no one else knows about it except me. I found my brother's friggin' picture at Dealey Plaza with Clyde right under or right in front of the the Texas Book Depository. I'm not going to tell you where, but they're all in the photographs. The evidence is there. The orders came from the government itself.
But they're in Grodin. They're in Grodin's book.
They're in Grodin's book, but I won't tell you which.
Well, where
I know what Clyde looks like.
I got Grodin's book right here. I've got it open.
I'm not going to say where it is. You do the homework. Anyway, you look up what this guy, John Bicquia. John Bicquia started talking about, Roy Hargraves or whatever, saying that there was a circle, a jerk circle. That's what he was doing with the kid in our backyard. Whoever jerks off first gets killed. Why would this guy says he's gone to Harvard, and then he talks about a circle jerk?
Ridiculous.
Take a look at all the people, the way he talks. This guy, take a look at the picture of John Bicquia, right? And then take a look at the slavist bank robber by the name of Bones or Boney. B-O-N, I think E-Y or just B-O-N-Y. That's Clyde with the mustache now that looks like John Bicquia. He's got a skull and bones toque on with an orange bag.
Where is that photograph? Yeah, where is that photograph?
Just put images. Let me here. I'll look it up here. You put images of in Bing here. Let me look it up here so you see it. I couldn't even come out. It was the first day I went out just to get a call. I also got almost pleurisy the director upstairs got me antibiotics, so I started taking them today. I couldn't even go to the pharmacist because I was that sick.
Images of what?
Images of Bony, B-O-N-E, Bony Bandit. Let me see if that's the one. Sorry, I put it in the wrong spot here. Images of B-O-N, is Bony B-O-N-E-Y?
Well, it might be. I mean, I'm looking at images of Bony Bandit, and there's nobody that looks like Clyde.
Okay, yeah, no. Yes, it is here. Okay, you put Bing as your search engine, and then you see a guy that looks like what do you call it? The skeleton. Before you even click in there, it has a skeleton horse and a guy with a neckerchief over his face. And
yeah, I see that. I'm looking at that.
Okay, and then you see the first one on right going,
to the left
on
of
the
it.
top there. Yeah, and you see this guy. When you click on, you see that the toque he's wearing has got skull and bones. That's Clyde. Take a look at that.
That's Clyde?
That's Clyde. And see what on the other side is. Bonnie and Clyde and a plane in between. Do you get my drift that this is all known by the government? They don't want this stuff to come out. What irks me now is who lives on what do you call it? That death threat that you got from James Cobblestone. John Allure lives in Whitechapel, North Carolina.
I don't even know if I don't even know that I'm aware that I got a death threat from Cobblestone.
You got a death threat. It's there.
Where is it? It's in my email?
In your email from Alfred.
When did I get this?
I'll send it to you. It was hence at the time when you started making these, putting this stuff out. So, you don't know what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a guy who was known as the Strangler here in Toronto, or went to Boston and did the Boston Strangling. Who do you think the first victim was? My mother's, one of her best friends. She was a Latvian woman that my mother met during the, when we were sent into, not concentration camps, but, what do you call it, disposed people, because Latvians, Lithuanians, and Estonians went into various, what they called it, a DP camp.
Okay.
And my mother met the first victim. That was a woman who used to take care of me. The first Boston Strangler victim. So we got Boston Strangler. A guy's been sitting for doing the co-ed murders in Michigan. And in 1980 he appeared. His name is John Norman Collins. You know how Clyde said that he got these co-eds? Playing Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson will give you a lift. The co-eds need a lift to their, from A to B. So he's gone through your area. So you got the death threat. You put it out on the internet. I wanted to tell you, you're playing hardball with the government here that's been suppressing these cases that go on and on from the, Boston Strangler, the Zodiac. They've linked it in. They've got the friggin' DNA. They've known who the Zodiac is from 1970. And they try to pin it on some sucker again. This goes on and on. Anyway, if you just look on the video of John Norman Collins, after you see it, you see this guy is not going to be let out for the rest of his life.
Wait a
minute. He was convicted on one of the co-ed murders.
What's his name again? John
Norman Collins, Collins.
There's a whole bunch of YouTubes about him.
Okay, now when I looked at these things, remember I told you he put in that little Carol voice that they pinned it, or Clyde had this guy set up by the name of Peter Woodcock, who's now dead. Well, what I found is there's a whole encyclopedia of cases where they've set up a patsy right? There's so many cases where the person said, I didn't do it, then he goes through the whole rotten system, and before, there was no DNA, and then all of a sudden, the DNA said it wasn't him. Well, guess what? They did homicides all over the United States, because how many people were killed because of Kennedy that they had to get rid of, other than that.
I thought a lot of them were done by Roscoe White.
Roscoe White Schmite. It was done by none other than the biggest killer of all, Clyde and his cousin, WalterTabinski. They were the ones that, like I'll say again, who was Hoover talking to the next day with that fat-ass Johnson? That's what was on their lips. Tabinski. That's the most important thing. And these guys are laughing. So that's why when he says Zodiac, he's done all these things, then he moves into another area. It's like cluster murders, whether it's Arizona or California or Ohio, all of these unsolved murders. Who do you think the son of his? He had one son. You know what the guy has? A shipping business. Easy to do murders along the highway routes, right? Wake up who you were dealing with.
You mean like a trucking business?
That's right. Easy to bring in, dope and whatnot. They were the French Connection, I said before. This is heavy drugs. And he said in his confession that he was sent into Central America to kill I don't know how many people as a paid mercenary, so they didn't have this immigration problem of Guatemalans and Nicaraguans here in America. That's all part of the Iran-Contra situation with the Ollie North. They don't want this to come out. That's why he can indiscriminately. And then you're talking to a guy, Alfred, who's already done 20 people, murdered 20. You're having a conversation with a serial killer.
When did I have a conversation with him?
On the internet, when you're emailing, hey, Alfred, you're going to be incarcerated, or
you mean way back when I published bank robbers and serial killers?
Yeah,
that was right. A long time ago, Haley.
That's a year ago, but don't think that they're not going to. Like Clyde said one day, I take my time. I don't forget, and I'm a very patient man. So when you go on there, you've endangered your whole family. If he's gone in and done home invasions, that they have the DNA of who.
What do you mean? When I published that article?
Yeah.
Haley, I published it because I thought you were dead, for God's sake. I was honoring you by publishing that.
Oh, that I was going to stay alive. Your whole family will be at some point. He can get anyone at any time with a sniper rifle, any time. But like I said, the capital city murders that are unsolved in Wisconsin is done by him. Easy pickings.
The capital city murders right here in Madison?
Yes. Like, wake up. Why do you think your wife got all upset? You're stepping on people's toes that are organized crime, murders, of the highest order. Who understood, where I was coming from was Galen Ross. The elite serial killers. They're not just serial killers. They're murder for hire from the government, and the government's for. Why isn't the Zodiac case been solved? Why isn't the co-ed murders been resolved? Why isn't the Bricka case resolved? Why isn't the Percy case resolved? Why isn't the Robinson case resolved? Why isn't the Sims case solved? Now, the Tracy Allure case is very important because John Allure, who is now not in Quebec, he lives in Whitechapel in North Carolina. He took a private investigator to unravel this, not a cop, because the cop got rid of his sister's underwear. DNA was on. Clyde's DNA. I took a photograph of the daughter, the Teresa Allure, because Clyde showed it to me along with Sharon Pryor, because I said, "Oh, is she ever a lovely-looking girl? Who is she?" Clyde says, "Oh, that's my third wife." I said, "That doesn't look like your third wife." So one day when Clyde went to the dentist, I photographed these girls. He takes their wallet and he takes their photograph out of the wallet as a souvenir. So I just wanted to, to tell you, you tread on heavy, and you better tell your family and be upfront about it, because they have to be warned, what you did in putting that on the internet. This is covered up from the government up. These are the people that made the money with the Vietnam War, and who wanted it, from Nixon on who made money with the whole thing. But he went after people, from the Hughes, the family. He also killed Bowles, Boles, on and on, home invasions. So I was thinking, how easy for Clyde to find where you live, to surveil it and how they get in and do a home invasion. Do you have security? Probably not in the highest order. So anyway, I just wanted, after I found it, oh my God, here is Fetzer, and he's talking to a kid who's already killed 20 plus. Huh? But I don't like the way you're talking about my family. I saw the in between emails. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm going to try to stay alive and do my business. You do your business, but don't start raising flack of every person, anyone you meet that don't. The other thing that I wanted to say, if what the conversation I had with Nelson, I says, Nelson, 9/11 was the biggest bank heist of all. How did you guess that, Haley? I says, well, what the were all these Brinks trucks coming there and bringing out the gold at the bottom there? Now, if there was a nuclear problem or all this heavy molten lava, they wouldn't have allowed the Brinks trucks. This is the gold from the Second World War that was taken away from underneath there. Where did the fucking Jews sit on? Is there gold right on top of it? That's what the whole thing was all about. And one guy was right on the ball that were sent you an email. Why would Wall Street boys in their own nest and have nuclear contamination? Why would they build another scraper on nuclear contamination?
They weren't able. They weren't able to build it. They put in 2 pools instead.
Yeah, whatever they did, no one would go there. The whole thing is, it's all full of. The whole thing is, it was a big heist, the biggest gold heist that ever was. Take a look in the old newspapers.
Well, how do you think it was done if it was done with nukes? I published a half a dozen articles.
No. Like, when I started seeing that you're starting to raise plaque about here, they could have easily done it with these very, like I said, with the, dynamite or whatever.
No, they couldn't have.
When I went to this stupid Hilton hotel, I paid stupidly $250 a night. At 6 o'clock in the morning, they had to peel me off the ceiling because they just detonated a building beside. These skyscrapers are built now, the new ones, already with the explosives inside. So if at any particular time they want to take it down, they do. And this is a common occurrence here in in Manhattan. So, don't be scared. Like, well, I want my money back. I don't want to be wakened up, thinking the end of the world is here. Well, do you think the friggin' Hilton Hotel would reimburse me?
When was this? When was this?
I don't know, in 89 or 90 or whatever. All of these buildings are built with shit.
I'm just kind of floored by your change in attitude. You've never had this attitude before.
No, it's because when I saw when you're starting to do dialogue with Alfred, and when I was in that coffee shop, sweating bullets when I saw Clyde. You called Alfred and said, well, Haley's just seeing Clyde. You're putting my life on the line. What for?
Haley, this is over a year. This is over a year ago. What are you coming up with this now?
Because I want to tell you, you're treading on really serious stuff.
I figured that out a long time ago, Haley.
Yeah, but anyway,
I've gone out of my way to try to protect you.
What? Why? For calling me and then putting this on the internet? Now I can't even come out of my apartment?
Good God, I did.
How are you doing me a service?
We have had, 50 talks.
Anyway, don't ever call me again. I wanted to say, be very protective of your family and alert, because you went in there where the whole government has protected these mercenaries, and they've been alive for years, and they don't intend to open this can of worms up any time soon because of the liability of it. It would cause a revolution. Okay. It's heavy stuff.
Thanks, Haley.
But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Now, Ed, perhaps you'd like me to make a few observations about that phone call?
Yeah. First, I got a couple questions for you real quick. Do we know where she is today, and is she okay?
We don't know. She doesn't want me to make any contact with her. She always initiated contacts with me. And, I'd like to believe she's okay. But since Oli and I did the show where we talked about it and played this very clip, it's anybody's guess. I mean, a lot of people know her. A lot of people know her. She is well known to the police. She has told them their story. I asked her, had she got a lot of this information out before, and she told me actually she had when she was a radio show co-host. Now, when she talks specifically about these threats, she's going all the way back to December 24th of 2012. If you go to bank robbers and serial killers, you'll see that I got a comment from Facebook from Alfred saying he's Clyde Forshaw's youngest son, and he can say for sure this is all crap. Haley was my dad's ex-girlfriend. She's crazy. It goes on from there. I say, Alfred, surely you jest. If Haley's full of it, then why was Clyde stalking her on Friday in a Scottish outfit, wearing oversized shoes and a cap pulled down? That's where she said I was giving away and putting her in. Alfred says, my father was in a car accident last year, can barely move on his own. I'm his caregiver now. He goes nowhere without me. He says, again, when he searches my name he on Google, he gets a Wikipedia that says I'm a conspiracy theorist. So he says I'm some kind of nut job. And I say it's merely a coincidence that I received the following email just this evening. Jay Cobblestone. Now, that's what Haley was talking about as being a death threat. If I had only, appreciated what it really meant, which she understood perhaps better than I at the time. Now, we're talking about a whole family here. There's quite a few individuals involved. It's just not Clyde. He's got an oldest son, Paul. He's got a son, Jay, who's a pilot and a pilot instructor. There's Clyde Forshaw Jr., Alfred, who initiated the exchange with me, is an attorney. And Alfred, according to Haley, has been participating in knocking off a series of ATMs with Clyde, where they seem to have made a whole lot of money doing that. They've been found recorded on many video records when they were knocking off these ATMs. They've committed many bank robberies. She has brought me to photographs where she identifies Clyde as the person in the photograph pulling off the bank robbery. Now, you go to bank robbers and serial killers, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. There's much more to discuss here, but let's go to Oli and let him have a few words in here to continue.
Thank you, Jim. I just want to say that this call from Haley, it differs dramatically from all the other ones. She's very confused, very not specific with any details. I think it sounds... a lot of the things she says, if you don't know her background and know exactly who she is, some of it sounds like a bit of a mumbo jumbo. Because normally in the other call, she's very, very into details, very, very accurate and with lots of photos and background info and so on. So, but and this is also why both Jim and I have been talking about why this change of attitude, because she was so aggressive towards Jim in the end. Normally she's very humble and appreciative of Jim Fetzer here. And I came up with a possibility that she might have been threatened while making this phone call. I don't know what really happened, but this is my opinion that might have been the case.
Let me explain that. It was this phone call that led me to resolve that, well, if Haley's right, there are two possibilities. If she's wrong, if, as Alfred says, she's crazy, this is all nonsense, then I really don't have anything to worry about, right? But if she's right, and I've listened to her long enough over all these years, and Ole tends to agree with me, if she's right, then they know they have me on their hit list. She knows they have me on their hit list. I know they have me on their hit list, but the world does not know. So if they knock me off and the world doesn't know why, they'll be scratching their head and say, gee, I wonder what happened to him. So I resolved that I ought to go ahead and explain to the world what's been going on, that there is this threat, that it appears to be because I've been exposing this huge history of criminal activity, including some of the most important political assassinations of the 20th century, and that that the world needs to know what's going on here. And Ole, I'm very grateful to him for joining me in this effort, because he having now participated in the radio broadcast we did on my own show a week ago, has placed himself in similar peril. So I just think it's terribly important that, if something should happen to me, the world should know why. Because this whole story is just devastating in impugning the integrity of the Toronto Police Department, the Royal Canadian Police, the FBI. I even went to the U.S. Attorney here in Madison. As far as this business about the Capitol City murders, I put on when I just published this on radiofetzer.blogspot.com, I put up a post about the Capitol City murders, listing these 6 or 8 women who were killed, and the photo of Clyde Forshaw that Haley had identified, and you can compare it to the other photographs of him committing the Geezer bandit murders and the whole host of other things that I identify here. In the article about bank robbers and serial killers. But it seems to me the world needs to know this history, because I'm afraid that I'm convinced that Haley's been speaking the truth. It's so detailed, it's so specific, and you're going to hear more later during this program of what I mean when I make that claim.
I would also like to say that, of course, the government and the authorities are more than welcome to take part of these conversations. I'm sure that Jim, as long as it's done in the normal legal way of looking into crimes and handling witnesses and how to deal with them, because the way it's been, Haley has been contacting the authorities on so many different occasions. And the only thing that has happened is that they've either neglected her or put her in even bigger danger, because she's been, she's been threatened, and she's been in an awful situation many times because of this. And the reason also why she's coming forward with all of this, I mean, she has no personal gain whatsoever, as far as I can see, except putting herself in grave.
Ole, you're absolutely right. And she has had a lot of evidence. At one point when she was discussing with the Toronto police, they asked her, could she prove this? And she explained she had a mountain of evidence that proved it. And they asked where, and in her apartment. So they went to her apartment. They took it all. They kept her out of her apartment while they ransacked the apartment and took all the evidence she had. It was completely outrageous. I mean, that's the level of corruption and degradation of the Toronto Police Department in relation to all these issues. She even went to the cold case officer and told him how much evidence she had about how many cases. And he said, well, you're going to put me out of business. Are we still there? Are we still there, Ole?
I am. I think I disappeared there for a while. I got disconnected. No, I just wanted to say that for Haley, there's absolutely no personal gain in this. I mean, she's only putting herself at great risk coming forward with this. But what she says is that her big goal is to reveal this so that the families of all of these victims, I mean, we're talking so many, that these poor families can finally get closure, find out what actually happened to their loved ones who committed the crime, and by this manage to get a closure of the tragedies.
And of course, as you well know, Ole, this man is very adept at murdering people every possible way. He has strangled them, he has stabbed them, he has shot them, he has, chopped them up, cut them apart, eviscerated them. I don't think there's a mode of murder that if what Haley is telling me is correct, he has not practiced. He has robbed banks, knocked over ATMs, committed serial murders. She told me how they'd be driving along the street and he'd see a woman who was walking alone, and he'd turn around and go back just to kill her because she was vulnerable. And, he'd say she shouldn't have allowed herself to be so vulnerable. Well, most people don't expect that there's a predator in the vicinity of the caliber of Clyde Forshaw, who has committed crime after crime after crime, by Haley's count, as many as 1,000, where he and Walter Tabinski together may be the two greatest serial killers in all human history.
Yeah, I would also say that both Jim and I, we put ourselves and our reputation really on the line here to step forward with this information, because but I just feel that after listening to all of these, I think it's about 100 hours of conversations, that the details and the evidence that she brings forward, I just feel that this is a very credible woman, and that is also why I think by getting this out in the open, my hope is that this will protect her as well, because if something would happen to her, then it would point straight to what we're talking about and to these two people, Walter Tabinski and Clyde Forshaw, because this would be the people that would be behind her termination if that was the case.
As you know, Ole, she has explained that actually there were two persons impersonating Lee Oswald down in Mexico City, one of whom was Walter Tabinski, and you can find a photograph of him in Bank Robbers and Serial Killers. She's identified that person as Walter Tabinski. He's, by my estimate, about 6'2". He's at least 220 pounds. He doesn't look anything like Lee Oswald. But she said the other was a short fellow with a ruddy complexion and blonde hair, and that it was Clyde. So that both Clyde and Tabinski were there in Mexico City. Now, as you know, but most Americans don't, J. Edgar Hoover learned from these photographs and from the audio tapes, which were clearly not photographs of or the voice of Lee Oswald, that someone was in Mexico City impersonating Lee Oswald. He actually put out a memorandum to all of his agents in charge across the nation, advising them that someone was in Mexico City impersonating Lee Oswald. Now, in my opinion, if that's all you knew about the assassination of JFK, you'd already know it was a conspiracy. You'd already understand it was a conspiracy, even that single fact. Now, imagine if he'd acknowledged there were two different persons in Mexico City impersonating Lee Oswald. I mean, then it's inescapable. I mean, there's no way around it. In fact, until I had these conversations with Haley, I had no idea there was actually a second person, apart from the one whom she identifies as Walter Tabinski, who had also been there. Did that also come as news to you as it did to me?
If you're asking me, yes.
Yes, I am, Ole, yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. I mean, this is the thing with Haley. She supplies a lot of new information, and that has really surprised me. But then when I check it out, it holds. It really does. Again and again, she comes up with details that I had absolutely no idea about, but that fits perfectly into this jigsaw puzzle.
And of course, we'd heard about the name Raoul, never heretofore identified, always a mysterious person in relation to the assassination of Martin Luther King. He actually was staying at a hotel downtown when he received phone calls, or his staff, ridiculing him for staying in a rich man's hotel, and the suggestion he should be staying at a black hotel. He moved to the Lorraine Hotel. The security, of course, was vastly reduced, which was the whole point in getting him to move to the Lorraine. And then it appears, I mean, if what Haley tells us is correct, it was Walter Tabinski
who fired the shot that killed Martin Luther King. Now, we've heard multiple stories about it. We all know it was fired from the brush opposite the Lorraine, where the next day the Memphis police went in there and they tore out all the brush so there wouldn't be any possible lingering evidence. I mean, the complicity of the police departments in these various murders is simply staggering, because then we get a replication again in Los Angeles, where the LAPD appears to have been complicit in the assassination of Bobby, and also actually literally after the assassination dismantled the pantry and destroyed all of the portions of wood and so forth that had bullet holes, where there were as many as 14 bullet holes. I mean, Sirhan had expended his weapon 8 rounds, but there were as many as 14 fired. Bobby was hit like 4 times from behind. The shot that killed him was fired from behind and entered, behind his right ear from a distance of about a half an inch or an inch and a half. Sirhan was nowhere near Bobby that close. He was always in front of Bobby, but there was a security guard behind him by the name of Cesar Chavez. Thane Eugene Caesar, who had a similar caliber weapon, who was behind Bobby and who may have been, fired several of those shots. When Thomas Noguchi, a world-famous medical examiner, performed his autopsy and came up with the conclusions that were inconsistent with the police department, where the medical examiner's conclusion should be the beginning of any serious investigation, unless, of course, they've been altered, as in the case of JFK, where they altered the X-rays to conceal a massive blowout to the back of the head. They substituted another man's brain for that of JFK. They even went to the trouble of revising all the home movies. They gathered up all the photos and films taken in Dealey Plaza. For 2 weeks, they had agents stationed at the photo processing labs. Unless there's some reason to suspect it, the medical examiner's report ought to be the basis for any investigation. It was inconsistent with the police department, so what happened? Noguchi, this world-famous medical examiner, was fired. I mean, it ought to have been the police who were clearly complicit in covering this up. Now, Haley told me that she witnessed some footage taken in the pantry of the ambassador during the shooting, and she'd actually seen Clyde's face behind Bobby. But that when she searched for that footage later, it was no longer there. So if what she is telling us, he was also involved in the killing of Bobby Kennedy. So, I mean, this is all stunning stuff. I mean, from beginning to end, and especially when she says how the government has known all this, for all these many years. And I don't recall now if we had a break in the transmission, but I was observing that even the cold case officer at the Toronto Police, when Haley went in and explained to him how many cases she could solve if he would only follow up on the information she had for him, he said, "What do you want to do? Put me out of business?"
Oh, okay, guys, I got knocked off for a little while there, so I might have missed some answers to my questions. When I left off, I was asking if Haley Otis, if we know she's alive today, and I think the answer was we don't know.
That's right. We do not know.
But, James, you did make some reports to the FBI and to the local police up there in Canada to check on her, like a well check for her?
Well, this was back in December of 2012. I mean, look, Haley has never been even willing to give me her address, okay? And I ran into a stone wall when I thought she had been murdered back in December of 2012. If you go through all the audio files I have embedded in that article, you'll even hear some of my phone calls to the FBI, for example, in a U.S. attorney office where I made contact and all that. I got absolutely nowhere. It was like running into a brick wall, and I'm at a loss as to how to pursue it at this point in time. Ed,
I'm confused now. But I thought this call with Haley was 2 weeks ago.
That call you heard was 2 weeks ago.
Right.
But
so we know she's alive at least as far as 2 weeks ago.
That's correct. I presume you were asking me whether she's still alive and well since that phone conversation, which has been my last contact with her. I'm explaining there have been other occasions when I thought she was dead, including back in December of 2012, where on the 20th we had very disturbing conversations, and I thought she was dead and went ahead and published this article
because I was in the belief that she was dead, I was very relieved when she eventually got a hold of me again. I mean, there have been intermittent breaks, in our communication, where the most recent was then from, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th of November here past 2013 until this last conversation in February, the 21st. There were 3 months there when I had no contact with her and I was sure she'd been taken out. I mean, all this information has been up there for over a year, and now she calls me and tells me, her interpretation. It's like she just ran across it again of these exchanges with Alfred and this guy Cobblestone, which he's telling me is a death threat. And I'm thinking, well, gee, if Haley is telling me that, I'm a dead man, and they know it, and she knows it, and I know it, but the world doesn't, wouldn't it make, I have two choices, to talk about it or not to talk about it. If I don't talk about it, no one will know why I had been taken out. If I talk about it, at least the world will know why. And Ole has concurred with me in that judgment. And we went ahead and did this 2-hour interview of our own on The Real Deal, which is the most recent one posted on radiofetzer.blogspot.com, where you can also see the information. Haley directed me to these capital city murders. So I did a screen capture of a condensation of the information about 6 or 8 young women who were murdered. And I have contacted the Madison Police Department about this. I've also posted there the photograph she was talking about in this conversation, which we just reviewed. So tell me more, Ed. What more do you want to know now?
Well, okay. I actually also put out a press release on this, and it's up on about 175 different websites, and I know just a few of them alone have gotten like 2,000, 3,000 hits just on one site. So definitely, the word is definitely out there. Okay, well,
it's huge, Ed. It's huge. I mean, For example, Ole, and I want him to elaborate on this, did research, about. I mean, she and I have many times gone through Robert Grodin's book, The Killing of a President, because it's quite an impressive collection of photographs related to JFK. And she's taken me through the back of that book, where there are multiple photographs of the man in Mexico City, unless it's in the search for Lee Harvey Oswald. We've made reference to both, and where Ole has found where he believes we have photographs of Clyde actually in Dealey Plaza, and I'd like to have Ole expand on that, because he found, especially on page 57 of The Killing of a President, the figure he believes was Clyde Forshaw there, and Haley had already identified a man on the grass opposite the grassy knoll, whom she says was WalterTabinski, wearing a bulletproof vest, and whom she believes was firing at JFK. So I'd like Ole to add a few words about this, and we can discuss it further.
Okay, real quick, before Ole gets to that, though, because we did have, now you said that you were contacted via Facebook by one of these people, the son of one of these people that Haley Otis makes these accusations against. Now, his son contacted you via Facebook, correct?
Haley, Ed, you missed that when you were off. I went through all the comments that were published by Alfred. It's at the bottom of Bank Robbers and Serial Killers. You go to the bottom there, you'll see the comments that come in through Facebook. There's several from Alfred, and then there's this one I put up there that had come by email from Cobblestone, to which Haley was making reference. Okay, you can find them right there. They're with the article. They all came in. They all came in between 24 December and 28 December 2012.
So you went back and forth with them on Facebook and an email, but you never actually talked to these people.
Yeah, no, I didn't talk with them directly. No. Alfred learned of it because actually at the end of the article, I published the names and addresses of many of the members of this crime family, and included their phone numbers. And actually, Walter got a phone number from somebody who just picked it up and asked them if Clyde was the Geezer bandit or the Walter bandit, and that's when Alfred wrote the Facebook comment on the article.
Have you ever done any work on these people to see if they have criminal records or where they lived during these period of times, what they do for a living, this kind of stuff?
Yeah, listen, I felt I had my hands full with what I've got with Haley. I was all along trying to figure out what to do with it, to whom I could turn. And after my experience with the Toronto Police Department, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the FBI, I became very disheartened because it appeared to me none of those agencies, which ought to have been taking a responsible interest in this, displayed the least inclination to follow up on any of it, not even the U.S. Attorney right here in Madison.
Oh, no, I hear you. I got clients all the time that are victims of all kinds of situations, and we try and get police help and FBI help, and it's an uphill battle all along the way. Okay, but Oli, can you respond to those questions that Jim was asking you about a minute ago? Before I
I just wanted to say also that I try in an attempt to help Haley without her asking for it, but to try and protect her as much as possible. I contacted the international lawyer Alfred Labremont-Verbré and asked him if he knew anyone that could help her. Because it's so difficult when you can't go the normal way. If you can't approach the authorities the normal way and get sort of protection for the witness and a proper legal investigation, you have to find other ways. So I was trying that way, but we never found...
Who's the lawyer you contacted? What's his name?
Alfred Labremont-Verbré.
Okay.
And American might pronounce it Alfred Weber, but I mean, he's rather well known. He participated in the tribunal, the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, that found George Bush and Dick Cheney responsible for war crimes, and he's a fairly elevated figure.
I've heard the name. I'm familiar with who he is. One thing I'd like to add, though, is when you're trying to make these reports, especially in another jurisdiction, and you're trying to make a police report over there, one thing I found really works is if you make an affidavit, okay, either for yourself and your first hand as a witness, or if you can get the victim of the crime to write up an affidavit, and then you send it via FedEx to that local police department or the FBI, wherever you have to send it to. Usually there's some action because someone at the other end has to sign for it, and you get a little bit more action that way if they see you've put your allegations in writing and you've sworn to it. So just in the future for everybody who's listening.
I like that, Ed. That's a valuable suggestion. I could pursue that here locally.
I would really recommend it, yeah. But I'm sorry, Ole, I keep interrupting you, my friend. Go ahead. Every time he talks, I jump in.
No, don't worry. No, it's what I found really interesting is that Haley claims that both WalterTabinski and Clyde have told her themselves about what happened that day. So that has made it a lot more interesting for me for the details, because that story that she has been giving us has filled in details that I was not aware of before. And what she claims is that WalterTabinski, he was standing, when the motorcade came first, it turned from Main Street to Euston. It did a 90-degree down Euston going north. And then it did this infamous turn 120-degree down on Elm Street, passing the schoolbook depository. Just when it did that left turn, on the left-hand side, just opposite the so-called Umbrella Man, there's this person that Haley claims is WalterTabinski. He's dressed in very light clothes. You can see him very clearly in the Zapruder film, especially the versions where it's not cut too hard. You will see him up in the right corner. He's when the limo goes, it's exactly when Kennedy is hit from the front of some of the first copies of the Zapruder film where the film jumps. That is exactly up in that corner when you will start seeing this guy when the limo disappears behind the Stedman's freeway sign.
Is Trabinski alive today?
Yeah, these people are alive, man.
Yeah, and active.
We gotta call him up, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
no, but this
brilliant idea, Ed.
I'll do it.
Okay, but anyway. This guy he's dressed in light clothes, and he's got a big black or dark brown bulletproof vest on him. And what you can see is he's almost like in a tactical stance, and he has some kind of black weapon, small weapon in his hands. And you can see that he's aiming it. I mean, it's just like 3-4 meters from the limo when it passes. And it looks like he fires, and then he just lets his arm drops down the sides. that is what, according to what Walter is said to have told Haley, his task was to fire some kind of tranquilizer, making the president not being able to move, to throw himself down to the floor in the limo and so on. This is like, that's her story. I don't know, but it matches with this tiny little bullet hole in the throat that I thought was a shot coming straight from the front through the window screen. But what she says is it makes sense as well, because the hole, according to the doctors at the Parkland Hospital, was only 3 to 4 millimeters, very small, and there was no exit hole on the back of the neck of Kennedy. So it could be true, and the person there fits exactly what she says. And also you can see in some of the photos, just when the motorcade has and the limo has disappeared on their way to the Parkland Hospital, there's some photos taken in, and they're all in Robert Groden's book, where you can see there's like a big bus. I think it's the press bus. And just when that has passed, there's this man, same guy, blonde, light clothes, big black bulletproof vest, just walking calmly across the street towards the Texas School Book Depository. Now that is who she claims is WalterTabinski. Clyde, when it comes to Clyde, and once again, this is according to Haley, what Clyde had told her himself, is that to the left of the School Book Depository, there was like a cement pillar where Abraham Zapruder was standing up and shooting this very famous film, the Zapruder film. And to the left of him, there's like a white wall. And if you noticed, I think it's in the Orville Nix film and so on, you can see that there's been a car reversed up against the wall. It's to the right of where the so-called badgeman is standing. And this, it looks like the back of a station wagon, and most probably it's a Plymouth 1961 or so, white and turquoise, according to Haley, that is reversed in, and right next to it you can see there's a shooter with you can see he's got like his elbow on top of the roof of the car, and he follows very clearly, he follows the limo aiming at it, and that, according to her, should be Clyde. Then the most probably the driver of the car would, according to Haley again, be her brother Roland Otis. I would also say that
Haley's still in touch with these people today. Haley's still in touch with her brother and Clyde, and she's still in touch with these people.
I think
no.
Go ahead.
As far as she knows, her brother is dead, I think.
Okay, but what about the other?
Well, Clyde has been stalking her, Ed. I think you might have missed that too. But Clyde has been stalking her, because I talked about that also in the exchange with Alfred that's mentioned there. And, WalterTabinski is still alive and well, and insofar as I understand, killing people and, doing the things they do. I mean, it's really outrageous, but the authorities have taken no measures really to come to grips with this monstrous cancer. And she's repeatedly told me how the case is so huge and sprawling, and the Toronto police have been so knowing about these crimes taking place and done nothing about it, that the families would be outraged and the city would face enormous liability suits for not having done anything. I mean, Clyde even serves as a conductor on a public trolley, and he's murdered some of those who were passengers on the trolley when they saw things, or he thought they saw things that they shouldn't have seen.
He's still working on this trolley at his age.
Well, I don't know if he's still today, and I can't verify that today, but he was for a very long time.
Yeah, we're talking 20, 30 years, I think, something like that. And quite a few of these crimes were committed along the route where this streetcar and were. So
we might want to have Jerry play the second clip, Ed, because that will give you some idea about Haley's memory and recollection of some of these crimes. I think you'll find it quite fascinating.
Okay, shoot. Jerry, Jerry might have taken a break. Jerry, you there?
Yeah, coming right up.
Okay.
Thanks, Jerry. Let me just mention, by the way, the kind of evidence that they took at the Mercury Club on 15 July 1967, Haley took a photograph, and in the background were James Earl Ray and Walter Tabinski. I mean, she knows a lot of these people. She's met a lot of these people, including Charles Rogers, who was the first of the three tramps photographed in Dealey Plaza, being escorted presumably to the sheriff's department. They actually were never booked, and I'm convinced they were the fallback patsies if Oswald hadn't worked out. Jerry.
Yeah, I just want to make, before Jerry starts with the tape, I just want to make an announcement that, again, this is listener-sponsored radio. We have no corporate sponsorship. So if you want to support the station, you got to go to freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, and click on the donate button. This is the Opperman Report, a special edition of the Opperman Report. Normally we're on Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, every single Friday night. But we got a special show today with my guest, Jim Fetzer, who's an author for Veterans Today, and wrote this incredible article about, what was it called again, serial killers and bank robbers?
Bank robbers and serial killers. The CIA hires them, the FBI ignores them.
Bank robbers and serial killers. And as a matter of fact, I Googled it before, so if you just put in bank robbers and serial killers, it'll come up.
That'll get you.
You can also find that, you can find that article as well on my blog, the Opperman Report. We have also another special guest, Ole Demigard, who has been a guest on my show before. He has a website called Light on Conspiracies, and he has a couple of books out, so you can go to his website and check out his books. The reason why we're doing this special report is because of very credible death threats against Mr. Fetzer, and I guess including now Mr. Demigard, and maybe even me and Ann. As time goes on, and as we bring in more people onto the show. So, Jerry, why don't you go ahead with the tape?
So, Haley, what's going on? Tell me again.
Photograph the car. There's two cars directly in front of the house on the side.
Yeah.
And then another dark pickup, a GM. And there was a man that looked like Walter Tabinski, actually, with this, Christmas hat with a little bob. There, I photographed the guy, and then he backtracked to look at the house.
You photographed him? Okay.
No, I photographed him from afar, from where I was standing, but he backtracked. As he was walking, then he backtracked, took a look at the house and me, right?
So he's wearing a bit of a Christmas disguise.
Exactly. Now, what the FBI have done is they have to, probably by law, put Clyde as the most wanted individual in North America. So they've got him categorized as the unknown bandit. Get that? So not only does he have the geezer bandit as an outfit, but he's got all these little holly jolly, disguise masks. Now, a guy who was the owner of the amazing party store where Clyde gets a lot of his disguises, Clyde told me he stole a lot, but then he bought a lot. So he had direct confrontation by the way of being a customer in the store. So this guy last year made big hullabaloo because right at his peak time at Halloween, he gets these bombs that are ready to be set off in his store. And he lost probably close to $500,000 in sales at Halloween because of these bombs being there.
Right.
At that. Now, the first time that I lay eyes on this amazing party store was 2003. Sorry, when we went by it because it's right a few blocks away from where Clyde lives right now. And I said, "Holy moly! Take a look at that blown up witch at the top of the store. It looks like one of the Macy, floating Spider-Man or, whatever in the we have the Thanksgiving parade in New York, and also the Santa Claus parade. Those floating things. Well, it's a huge floating witch on a broom. And I said, get a load of that witch up there. And Clyde says to me, I'm going to blow that place up so that witch is going to ride up in the air. He laughs like that. I said, when do you plan to do that? Well, whenever the time is right. And then he starts talking about all the masks that he had bought in there. Now, the intimidation to the owner was he would have direct knowledge of where the geezer mask came from and all these other masks. So that was a terror tactic to him. Now, believe you me, this stuff went on and on for a few weeks. That the Toronto hazardous and bombs demolition squad was down there, closing off that whole area. Anyway, that is a story that goes into all the bombing stuff and how Clyde makes these pipe bombs and bombs. But anyway, they actually, I think, showed a few what they looked like. So the employees were scared to go. No customers showed up. They didn't want to be blown up real big. Remember where that comes out of? Crazy Saturday Night Live. Anyway, I intend to call the Ottawa also.
Well, it looks to me like they're finally going to try to take you out.
Yeah, they're trying to take me out now. She's coughing up real big. We got to really shut her up. So it looks like Clyde is parked right in front of the house and the cousin at the side. She's told up, she's coughed up too much information. She's shaking the tree. Let's take her out. So I'm not even going to go out today because I was supposed to go out and send the file.
No, don't worry about that. Yeah, don't worry about that.
No, but to this cop, he's waiting for it. So I'm not going to go out, not until I feel confident, because they already did. A cop in Toronto, right, set me up, called up Clyde, doesn't tell anyone, but calls up Clyde. Hey, do you realize that Haley's taping you? So he set me up. So Clyde came and tried to shoot me with his son, but not quite a week later after this cop.
How long ago was that, Haley?
That was year 2001, right? Right after, you see, what happened was I had called this cop. His name is Detective Sergeant Tony Smith. He's retired. So what he did was he took my information when I went in there, because I went into the long and short of all the hits that Clyde had done, and went on and on, started talking about the Frank Roberts, which is on their caseload, right? Frank Roberts is the inventor of Obisform. So I went into all the stuff, including the child killings and all that. He was very curt, very rude, very everything. And then I said, well, he chopped off, or he chopped up a black dude into pieces. The guy lived down the hallway where he did, and you would know his cadaver because he also cut the penis off and fed it to the ducks down on Lake Ontario here.
Who? Tell me about that one again, Haley. He killed someone and cut off his penis?
Yeah, he was a drug dealer that lived down the hallway where Clyde had two jobs. Not only was he the bus driver, streetcar driver, or whatever, he was doing at a particular time. But anyway, he was right, down the hallway where this guy had lived. Now, they've never identified him, but his cadaver was found in this High Park area, and Clyde took me to show me where he had disposed of the body parts down the Springbank Road, and he showed me the Pond Ravine area where he had dropped some here, some there, and it's in a unidentified. The chief coroner of Ontario set up a website where they have these body parts and the particulars where the cadaver parts or whatever have been found.
Yeah.
Anyway, when I tell this stuff to Detective Sergeant Tony Smith, he said, hey, we've never had an occurrence like that. I said, what are you talking about? I just read about it a number of years ago. Well, believe you me. So there I saw right there and then that this guy's been paid off. How many cops have been paid off? How long? Who knows? I don't know. Then he says to me at one point, make sure you don't have the head spokesperson for the hookers of Toronto here to come and chase me again. See, a lot of sex trade workers have been showing up all over the countryside in the city of Toronto, all over. You know, like, I found that they've never, ever categorized the missing individuals, children, men, whatever. There's not a category to it at all. It's not been categorized. So I found a website just last week that there's well over 6,000 that people have tried to log that are missing, and unsolved homicides. And in Toronto, I would say in this area there might be 2,000. Of that, Clyde has done well over 1,000. So we're talking, they don't want this story to ever come out, because this is beyond what the Picton case is in BC. You might have seen it, that the chief of police in BC, in Vancouver, said we could have and should have solved the Picton case. That was his words yesterday. Could have and should have. And this is the same with the Toronto police and all the police forces, like I say, Halton and Ottawa and Montreal area and Hamilton and, the Detroit-Chicago corridor. Because believe you me, Clyde and his cohorts there, his cousin and all his gang members would move around. Walter's from Winnipeg, so they go into the Winnipeg area, and Clyde's got two sons from the second marriage. They live in BC and Vancouver, the Victoria area, so they've got properties. They've got coin. So they work, killing off hits the son in BC in that jurisdiction, and then they do bank robberies. That's why the Vulture Bandit has been photographed by security cameras in BC, in the States, and if you go into the Geezer Bandit, you'll see also the link between the Vulture. And that's what I'm trying to prove right now, because if this comes out, how many bank robberies has this guy Clyde done with people like James Earl Ray, because they did machine gun robberies in Montreal. I mean, he started explaining that he got money from a big guy, as the Chinese woman said, a big man, or fat. The words that this woman used was fat man, right? Mm-hmm. But the payoff all the time came from either my brother or Walter, and Walter was the one that divvied up the dollars and cents that were taken out, that were done in a robbery. So Montreal at the time that he needed money to move around throughout the States and go into Mexico came from the robberies in Montreal that were done with a machine gun. And James Earl Ray's brother knew all about this. I mean, I knew about the name of the brother in 1967, in July and August of 67. So we're talking heavy stuff that I know. So anyway, the guy said, why would you have gone back after try to kill you? Why would you go into that house? I said, look, I had no alternative here. For years I would be plagued by phone calls of a death threat. When you least expect it, you're going to die. I wanted information, physical information, evidence, all these things to put this guy away. So that's what I started amassing. These police didn't want me to do that. So that's why they all retired as soon as I started talking. They want their pension. They don't want to care to solve these cases. It would make them a laughing stock. Little old lady proves all these cases while, like I said, I want the headlines, while the police, the authorities, were the dog.
Yes.
It's a hurtful thing, but how many children has he sodomized?
Yes.
That's the. Do you know how these people have been found mutilated? Like I said, that woman, she was disemboweled. That old lady that I told you, Henning, her last name. And Clyde used to talk about how he took this woman out, and how many, like other than that drug dealer, that he used to do the same ploy. The old. What do you call it, Stooges routine. Look up, The guy looks up. As soon as he looks up for one brief second, Clyde says he hit him with his knee right into the solar plexus. So the person grabs their stomach, and it's easy to then take the person down, because he said, then I put my two fingers right into their eye sockets, pulled out their eyes, and they were easy takedown. They couldn't see a thing.
God.
Can you imagine somebody telling me this kind of...
Yeah.
And I used to bite my tongue so that I wouldn't get riled up. And I just there right on the TV right now. 45, age 45, slain by Clyde. Okay, now Clyde, what he does, he's so smart that he gets DNA from a sucker all the time. So he told me this one gimmick that he does. He gets a hooker to collect the semen, either in a discarded safe or a diaphragm. He puts it inside out, so he gets the sucker's DNA, the sperm, into the vagina of whoever he kills. Huh? Yeah. Can you imagine what a diabolical piece of crap does that?
Yeah.
But this is the way. He's a hired hit, a professional, as the police call him. He leaves no stone unturned. You find an alibi, right? You make sure you're working for the TTC, because it can't come out. Serial killer working for the Toronto Transit Commission, doing hits while he's on the job. Because he cased out a lot of his prey right on of who he met during the day. That's who I was talking to this morning, a head guy in homicide, Tracy Kunginger. He met her while she was going to work on Parliament. He would chat her up. Christine Prince, he would chat her up. Actually, Clyde wanted me to always meet him at the corner where he had abducted, or where he had seen Christine Prince come onto a streetcar, right? And then he said he left the umbrella right there because it had his fingerprints. Her cadaver was left in the Rouge River, right where Sewell's Road is. He showed me where he put her. Unbelievable. It just goes on and on and on. And ever since I was a kid, when I tried to solve, I started reading Nancy Drew books, and I thought I have to get evidence, right? Mm-hmm. Key thing. I was going to solve these. I go to a sucker that is a paid-off cop from way back when. His name was Adolphus Payne. I mentioned him. He was the supposed takeout guy of Edwin Alonzo Boyd, so he's a hero. Well, his son went into the tradition of policing, and he's with the OPP, another cover-up artist. But what WalterTabinski had done was homicides that a guy hung for a crime that he had committed, but the guy was set up. And one was a soldier, and he had done this girl Carrier. I'm going to give you the spelling. I don't have all this material right in front of me. And when you say off the top of your head, how was Tippett killed? All right, Clyde had done a guy by the name of Colonel Attila Alticott, and they put a memorial. He was the military attaché for Turkey, and he took him out. Now, this is at the top of my head. I have no material in front of me, okay? It was on Friday. Let me think on the top of my head here. Friday, August. I think it was Friday, August the 27th, 1982. Might be dead on the button there. I have to remember dates and times and how many bullets were shot in his head of what Clyde told me. Can you imagine that all the time of remembering? Well, anyway.
You have an amazing memory, I'll just say that.
Okay. He was in his car. Clyde and his son stalked him for a week because they were stalking him from Regina Street in Ottawa, from where this colonel, Attila Alticott, had his residence with his wife and his daughter, to his Turkish embassy, which was on I can't pronounce it, but it starts with a W, something like Wurt or whatever. Anyway, I'm going to work on that, the Google map of the route he followed. So he'd follow, and at the right time, when he was coming off, he said this thing called the Western Parkway onto the Island something Parkway. The car had to stop where the what do you call it? The colonel was in, and it was the second car from the stoplight, and he would then turn a right onto the Island Parkway.
Okay.
Anyway, it was called the Island Parkway, but it's now known as the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway. So streets have been renamed where these hits have happened, just to make it difficult, right, for somebody trying to research based on what he said to me, right? But anyway, he said he had a Browning, a semi-automatic, which he shot got out of the car as the sun turned, veering to the right onto the Island Parkway on the side or whatever, and then he went over the meridian and shot a volley of, I think he said it was something like 11 bullets, 10 of which hit him in the head and in the throat area, the neck area. That's why I get mixed up.
Who is he shooting? Who is he murdering here?
Colonel Attila Alticott. I think it's. Let me see.
Where did this occur?
This was Friday. I think it was August 25th, 1982. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I was trying to take this course of how you remember dates and times and people and places of what was being said.
Yeah.
You know, like Clyde would say very vivid things like a red pillow within the room. And I would try to remember this, and that was Ida Dean Jean. And he placed that pillow, I think it was under his knees or under her head, something like that. I got to remember exactly. I'm almost have to go under hypnosis to remember word for word what he told me. Anyway, the pillow and what he was starting to talk about is where she had hidden her money and why he used the ice pick on stabbing her over and over again because he couldn't find the money. This old lady had hidden it in amongst Kellogg's, the top of the box, and then put all her material in her kitchen and filed it and had it in, sort of like her money in a sugar container in her kitchen or whatever, and he couldn't find it. He wanted to get in and out with her big coin. Oh, unbelievable. And he set up a guy first that the neighbors would see that this guy that had epilepsy and he couldn't remember. I told you that this was the guy that did the epileptic fit in front of the Dealey Plaza, right? So anyway, where did I get off? I went on a tangent here. Anyway, the Attila Alticott was shot, and Clyde said he threw the Browning, semi-automatic into the car. I think he said it was 9mm or something like that, 9mm, semi-automatic Browning. Threw it into the window and took off under the bushes, and he had his whole escape route planned. And then his son picked him up at the designated pickup spot. Now this was done over and over. He'd have the escape route planned. He'd have all these disguises because he's already semi-bald. He's just got a bit of hair around, sort of like, the way the monks wear it. The top of the head is bald, but they have like a circumference of hair around at the bottom of the head.
Okay.
Okay, so what he does is he's got all these wigs, rugs, I call them. He doesn't like the term wig or rug. He calls them a system. So I, one day, when I was doing the show with Nelson Thal, said, the hitman has to keep on killing because it costs an awful lot to be a member of the hair club for men. Each of these systems has to be handmade, and they're pretty expensive. So they go through within 6 months. You have to buy a new system. So I said that's why he has to kill another person, because belonging to the hair club for men is pretty expensive. So I said something like that on the show. So that's why he has to waste people for his next friggin' rug on his head. Anyway, one of the things that I taped was Clyde saying on a cellular phone to me, I think it was either Queen and Young or King and Young. He calls me up and he says, Haley, what am I going to do? My system. I had it taped down, but the tape is not holding it. And every time the streetcar door opens, the system keeps on flying backwards. What am I going to do? Everyone will see that I've got a system on my head. How vain can you get? How sick can you get? I said, look, Clyde, make sure that the door is shut. Then hand the transfers. Hold your hand over your head. Where's your hat? You know, where's all your disguises? Where's your TTC hat? He didn't even wear a hat that day. He was so concerned over his friggin' system. Can you imagine that? And he calls me over that. So I said, hold your hand on the top of your head and then shut the door and then hand the transfer. And when the people are seated, then they won't see that you have a rug on your head. What kind of a sick individual has been riding the TTC? And they made big hullabaloo. Some guy was found falling asleep, and some customer photographed a TTC ticket collector asleep at the helm, fast asleep, and that hit the front pages. Boy, oh boy. What I want on the front pages is ex-TTC driver does hits, Christine Prince, the little girl, Tracy, I can't at the top of my head here, it starts with a B. Anyway, a little black girl that he put in the Marie Curtis Park over a bridge. He showed me where he dumped her body. She used to come on the streetcar. So all these people he cased of who went down, black people or whatever. When they almost took him down, a police officer from the Toronto homicide squad wanted to interview Clyde. That's when I almost saw him have a nervous breakdown. What do they want to talk to me about? He started telling me. What do they have on me? I don't know. They've asked me to come into the police headquarters. So what it was a guy named Winter, Chad Winter, that he had wasted. Well, what did they have on this person? God, the damn transfer with Clyde's fingerprint on his person. So he had to explain himself out of that one. Well, I wouldn't have known who comes on my streetcar. He says, I don't know from day to day. Well, the guy was wasted, and he described to me how he wasted this guy with his son, kicking him with the pointed metal boot. Like he had these boots that he bought that had metal, almost like the knights would wear, like a pointed little cone.
Brutal.
You know what I mean?
Brutal.
Yeah, brutal. So he said we also, when the guy was dying, were kicking him, to death. But before that they did that hit, they said, the Clyde son said to me, I'm going to try this boot and how it works out on Haley. Huh? Because I've had to bite my tongue for all these years of how many times I saw how many cops, and it went nowhere. They just retired. So when these hits, of Eddie Mello were supposed to transpire, this, Tony Smith says, don't you tell anybody. Don't you tell anybody. I told this lawyer that I had at the time, what Tony Smith was planning. Tony Smith had called and spent the whole day speaking to this lawyer. And then the lawyer says, well, I can't partake of what our conversation underwent. And I said to the lawyer, well, tell me one thing. What I told you about Clyde, all the heavy stuff. Is that true? And then all he said to me was, yes, Haley, everything.
Who was it who said that?
It's a lawyer, and I won't give you his name over the phone because I'll kill him. I'll tell it somehow to you. Okay? Anyway, what happened was Tony Smith goes on his 2-week, or usually the cops work for three weeks nonstop.
Okay.
And then they take a week hiatus or whatever, and then they work again 3 weeks nonstop, and then a week hiatus. Anyway, at the time that Eddie Mello was going down, I knew exactly where he was going to be wasted, right? Because Clyde showed me right at the plaza where he was going to be taken down, and I told this to Tony Smith. So he says, when you get an inkling that the hit was going to go down, you call me. And this was Eddie Mello. So what happened is I couldn't get a hold of him. He says not to call anyone. I was trying to get a superior. The superior above Tony Smith was not available. Anyway, the hit happens, and all breaks loose because I go to Tony Smith, and then he starts denying everything I said and did. Then what he does to waylay everything, he goes into out of homicide into internal investigation. So if I come with a complaint, he's the person I'm supposed to speak to. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the superior, he came before a tribunal, a police tribunal there, because he also started trying to pick a fight with his superior and make him into someone who was sexually harassing this woman that had been calling Clyde. So her name was never even mentioned at the hearings, but I know who it was, and I'll tell you. I won't say it over the phone again here. But anyway, short end of it was the superior's word against Tony Smith. Tony Smith, all he wanted, he's in retirement, was his pension again. So all these lying friggin' cops, like he said, there's no cadaver of this dismembered person. Well, I'll send it to you, so I'll show you. It's for real. It's for real, and the Toronto police could have stopped all these hooker hits that have happened for years. So just like this Vancouver cop that said yesterday, this head chief of police of Vancouver, Robert Pickton's murders could have and should have been solved. He had the courage to say that yesterday in this news release that went around the world. Well, Robert Pickton had the pig farm. And Robert Pickton said, I wasn't the only one that put the hookers through the wood chipper. You know that movie Fargo?
Yeah. I do.
That's right. They put the person through the cadaver. So they had anthropologists on his property trying to piece together even a bone fragment of these hookers. So when this story broke, Clyde used to threaten me and say, Haley, there's not the only pig farm going there in B.C. We've got pig farms with the Hells Angels here. And if you say that much, you're going to end up in the wood chipper. So
you're saying you are going to wind up.
Yeah, they're threatening me that I was going to be wound up as a wood chipper and they'll never find my cadaver. Anyway, so what happened?
So does he have a wood chipper? Does he have a wood chipper?
Yeah, he has a wood chipper. A wood chipper was stolen. He has his own personal wood chipper.
Well, Ed, there's so much more. But what I want everyone to appreciate is that this may be we may have here the key to missing pieces in a multiplicity of assassinations of some of the most admired and politically significant figures in American history, including JFK, including Martin Luther King, including Bobby Kennedy. Subsequently, later on in the show, we'll talk more about John. But anyone here who's, interested in any of this, and I can't imagine a single American who isn't, affected by the deaths of those individuals, whoever is here in the audience ought to share with them three different sources now. One is the article Bank Robbers and Serial Killers, which you can find online and for which there is a link on Ed Opperman's show. You go to the Real Deal Radio Archives at radiofetzer.blogspot.com and check out the 2-hour interview that Ole Damigard and I did about this case. And now, of course, you've got a 3-hour interview here with Ed Opperman, and share it with everyone you can. Get it out everywhere you can. Contact, anyone who has interested in true crime stories or in American history. See if they would be interested in pursuing it. Places like Nightline or Dateline or Coast to Coast, just hit them. Tell them there's all this information out there and the American people deserve to know.
Yeah, the archive will be up also, too, on my blog and my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel called The Opperman Report. And the radio station, Revolution Radio, also has a YouTube channel. As a matter of fact, there's been a lot going on this week. I just got hit with a virus on my computer. We're having all kinds of audio trouble today with the Skype. I'm getting knocked off. Everybody's getting knocked off left and right here. And the station as well they're having some trouble with the Revolution Radio YouTube channel.
Ed, when I do interviews on topics like this often happens. I'm telling you, it's no coincidence. We're talking about a major missing pieces in American history. The government was complicit. The FBI was complicit. The CIA was complicit. The Toronto police have been covering up. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police know all about this. And the corruption. This is an encyclopedia of corruption in recent American and Canadian history. They don't want it out, Ed. It's not surprising that we're having all these electronic problems.
Yeah, I'm usually not paranoid, but I'm getting a little nervous. But let me ask you a couple of questions. She talked about, in the tape recording we just heard, she was talking about that she had been to the cops and she was dealing with a cop.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that? Go ahead.
Well, there have been multiple cases where, she's had a lot of trouble finding somebody who would take it seriously. I know she found one fellow with high-ranking with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police who was looking at her stuff, and the next thing she knew, he'd been sent down to Haiti on a very unusual assignment, and he was murdered while he was in Haiti. I mean, they've been trying to bottle up Haley forever. And, I just hope to God that no ill consequences fall to her because of going with the public with all of this. But it seems to me there's really no choice about it. I mean, if they're going to make me a dead man, then I can either talk about it and the world will know why I'm dead, or I can not talk about it and everyone will be left scratching their head. Ole and I discussed it, and he agreed with me that it's a better move to explain it because, again, I say the American people deserve to know.
And I would say I just would say it's not only the American people. I mean, these events have affected the whole world. So it's for everyone's.
You're absolutely right, Ole. Absolutely right. It's affected world history.
Now she also
individuals like with the courage, the intelligence, the integrity of a JFK or a Martin Luther King or a Bobby Kennedy are so rare that it's the conservative status quo succeeds if they can decapitate the most charismatic leaders of the progressive or liberal parties, and that's what they did during this series of assassinations in the 1960s. And I don't mean to leave Malcolm X out of that either, because he was offering brilliant critiques of American society and its fundamental injustice, especially in regard to the treatment of black people.
Yeah, I agree. We're trying to get Malcolm X's daughter to come on our show in upcoming weeks. I have coming up Mark Roy from the Weather Underground. In a couple of weeks, I have Cynthia McKinney coming up, and we have Cindy Sheehan coming up. But we're trying to get Malcolm X's daughter. But I have a question for you, too. Now, she discussed this woman, Otis. What's her first name again? Haley Otis.
Otis.
Yeah, Haley Otis. Now, she was saying that there was some kind of a hearing that took place. Was this about sexual harassment, some kind of a court hearing? What was that?
Ole, do you know what Ed's asking about specifically?
No, I don't.
No? Okay. Yeah, I thought I caught her saying something that one of these guys was at a hearing, that there was some kind of a...
Ed, she has made so many efforts to bring this to the attention of the authorities. I mean, it's simply appalling. I would talk to her and I hear again and again and again. I mean, one illustration was the cold case officer, where she went to him and explained how many of his cold cases could be solved. And he said, what do you want to do? Put me out of business? He wouldn't pursue any of it. Yeah. I'm even very troubled here in Madison that I've gone to the Madison police about these cold cases called the capital city murders. And so far, since I made contact with them, they have made no indication they're getting back to me. I'm going to pursue it. I think your point about affidavits is an excellent one, Ed. But it seems to me that,
I hear you. It's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle, trying to get the cops and the DA to work on your behalf. And then when you're fighting them, on the other hand, working a criminal defense case, it's an uphill battle. Even when they know that your clients, you can show them that your client's not guilty, and they still want to pursue. I have some questions about Haley Otis. How old is she today?
Let's see.
She must be around 17, maybe?
Yeah, she's about 70 years
Clyde,
old. Yeah.
I believe Clyde was born 43, WalterTabinski a few years older, and Haley a few years younger than Clyde.
Okay, and you said earlier that she had a radio show. What kind of radio show was it? Where are there
archives? It was called Cloak and Dagger, Ed.
Okay,
it was a well-known show in its time. It was talking about conspiracies. It was a radio show. It was I don't know that it was even internet at the time. I don't think there was internet at the time they were doing that. But it was out of Canada, Cloak and Dagger, and she was a co-host.
And did she talk about these kind of topics and specifics?
She did. She told me that she got a lot of this, that she explained it during the Cloak and Dagger shows. But, talking about it on a radio show is one thing. Getting authorities actually to take some sort of action or pursue it is a whole nother.
No, I understand.
But you can do searches on Cloak and Dagger, and you're going to come up with a whole lot of past shows.
Oh, you can actually listen to audio.
I suspect you can.
As far as I remember, she said that there are websites with these sound files.
Okay. There are websites that have archives with a lot of these shows.
She went on an alias as well, Elizabeth Windsor, and Agent Ladybug, these two aliases.
Now, Oli, you were telling me that there's a connection to the John Lennon assassination.
According to what Clyde has told Haley, or what Haley says that Clyde told her, that he was a second shooter together with Jose Perdomo, that he was there as well. And I can only say this is what she claims. I have no idea.
James, do you have any tape recordings of her discussing the John Lennon assassination?
Yes.
Yeah. Oli's listened to them more recently than I. So, yeah, there is something, yes. She does talk about the Lennon assassination in there somewhere. And I'd like to let it be known, to any authorities, federal, state, local, or whatever, that I'm glad to share my archives of conversation with Haley. Oli, I'm sure, would be willing to do that as well, because I provide them all to him. He has shared them with many, many people. I've shared them with many, many people. There's a lot out there, a lot of those out there who have them in part or in whole, and, who would be, I think, perfectly willing to make them available to those who have a serious interest in pursuing this.
For sure. I mean, the main thing is that the truth comes out there.
Now, she also made an accusation that one of these guys was sodomizing children.
Well, Clyde Forshaw, apparently, she's got one horrific story about taking two little boys out for fishing. I believe their names were Richard Hovey, H-O-V-E-Y, and Eric Jones. They were taken by Clyde and they disappeared. And Clyde's a very, very sick person. His depravities are quite extensive and varied, and I talked about how he had murdered people every possible way. One of the most gruesome stories she told me about was he was murdering a woman who was the owner of a jewelry store, and he, stabbed her or partially dismembered her or so forth, and she was curled like into a fetal position and merely whimpering when someone came to the door of the store and wanted to know if she was available. And Clyde very calmly, very coolly goes and answers the door and explains, no, she's not available now, but to come back later. Then he went back and took an axe and split her head.
Yeah, that's the impression I get, that some of these people, after they've killed so many times, it's just a day at the office. But let me ask you this. Now, you mentioned the names of these two young boys who were murdered during this fishing trip. Now, are there newspaper articles of these boys in this story?
Yeah, I'm sure. That's a great point, Ed. Yes, you could do searches on a whole lot of the names and cases. I mean, if you went back and listened carefully to the tapes that we've just played here, which is a tiny, just as a tiny fraction. Sure. And that second longer is a part of multiple tapes that I have embedded in the article about bank robbers and serial killers. I mean, there's several hours of my conversation with Haley embedded in bank robbers and serial killers. And you could get the names and follow them up, yes, and confirm the killings and so forth. And I'm convinced you're going to find them, that they're there.
Right. If people want to listen to more of these tapes, I'm sorry, only 1 second. If people want to listen to more of these tapes, there's a whole bunch of these recordings on the article on Veterans Today under Jim Fetzer. It's available on my blog. But real quick, another question is now, because we have the names of these boys that are turned up missing. Has anybody contacted their family with this information and said, because I'm sure they have family that are concerned and looking into investigating this murder?
Haley's made effort to contact the families of a lot of the victims, and They tend to run her through a lawyer or the police, and the police serve as a buffer so that the families never get the information directly from Haley or in a position to pursue it. You got to imagine, if you're the subject of one of these horrific crimes, that you may be very concerned that any information you're getting is legit, and therefore they create filters, but unbeknownst to them, the filters are actually depriving them of access, at least in the instance of Haley, to what I would believe to be accurate information about what actually happened to their loved ones.
Gotcha. What were you going to say, Oli?
No, also with Haley is that she comes up with incredible details that nobody would know if they hadn't inside information. So, and also there's so many cold cases that she talks to Jim about, naming details, dates, names, places where the body was dumped or buried or whatever. She has incredible information, and it's collected in these calls. I've been really wanting to try and go through them all and sort of make a system of them all, because she has a tendency to start talking about one thing and then she jumps onto another subject and another, and then she comes back to the first one, so which makes it a little confusing. So if somebody really took the effort to go through all of these hours of conversations, put them into real a filing system where all the different cases were separated, the evidence would be staggering, I would say.
And it's all coherent. I mean, she may switch from one topic to another, but it all hangs together. I've never detected any inconsistency in anything she told me about any of these cases, no matter how minutely she described it. And she's gone through many times, with the photographs, for example, in the search for Lee Harvey Oswald, the photographs at the back about, what she claims is Walter Tabinski that were taken in Mexico City, or the photographs of Clyde and Walter in Dealey Plaza, where, Oli seems to me to have done a very astute job of identifying what appears to be Clyde Forshaw on page 57. Now, I've spent a huge amount since 1992, a huge amount of time invested in research on the JFK assassination. Oli is an expert on assassins and assassinations. She has provided information and details that neither of us was aware of by Ole's own evaluation of what she has said to me, which he has listened to and evaluated for himself.
Okay. Let me hit you with a couple of things, because, like I said, I'm a working private investigator. That's what I do for a living. So I get a lot of phone calls from people, witnesses. I got to take witness statements. So when I hear you interviewing this woman, I don't hear anything all out of the ordinary that would cause me to question what she's saying. She does sound like a credible witness, and witnesses do start a story, and they're telling one thing, and they get distracted and going on, and you gotta meet that out, okay? So I have no problem with all of that. And a lot of what she says is extremely chilling, and you get that gut feeling of credibility there. My question now is, if she's giving you guys locations of where bodies are buried, has there been any kind of effort made to go and check that out?
I live in Spain, so it's quite a long distance for me to take a shovel and go and look for it. So the answer
I'm getting as close to this case with the resources at my disposal as I can. I don't have the time, the money, the opportunity to do anything like that. But if there are others there who are in the position to do it, I would encourage them. You can think of Ole and me as, doing the spade work on this case, but where I would welcome others participating in their own research to confirm, names, dates, and so forth, go through the conversations, for example, all those that are archived on the Bank Robbers and Serial Killers article, and see what they can come up with, because, it's impossible to cover up all of these things. It's right. Lincoln said, you can fool some of the people some of the time, and all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time. But there's going to be a lot of evidence of a lot of things she's reporting, which I'm very confident you're going to find there. And there are enough names and specifics that it ought not to be that difficult.
Well, let me ask you this now. There's a lot of ingredients in all this: the assassinations, the sodomizing children, the pedophilia.
The children are not merely sodomized; they were subsequently murdered. I mean, you got to understand. This
Correct.
is not. This guy plays hardball. These kids have never been seen again. They disappeared. He took them fishing, and they've never been seen again. Haley just happened. He was so open, and detailed, specific with Haley. She learned so much more than. No one in the world knows as much about these events as this woman, and therefore she ought to be in some witness protection program. Instead, I'm concerned that her fate may be entirely the opposite.
Yeah, unfortunately, it would be so simple to murder a 70-year-old woman that it's not even funny, and no one would barely investigate or anything. But a real question is, though, I have for you is: have you uncovered any connection to the Process Church of the Final Judgment, the satanic cult that was back involved in the Son of Sam and all that kind of stuff? With this,
I haven't.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay,
but I did have a friend who noticed that in this photograph I have of Clyde that Haley drew my attention to, which I actually have posted at radiofetzer.blogspot.com. He's wearing a knit cap with a skull and bones insignia, and my friend inferred that he actually was a worshipper of Satan. So it may be that there is such a connection there, Ed, that I don't recall Haley specifically addressing it. But, if we went back the whole corpus, possibly there's something there. It just doesn't stand out in my mind.
I would say also when you look into assassinations on this level, there's a lot of strange sexual behaviors when it comes to people surrounding it, the assassins and power elite around it, and sodomizing and these type of things are very, very normal. Also, when you look around the JFK assassination, you got like David Ferry, Clay Bertrand or Clay Shaw, that was also entangled with these people and as far as I know, into sodomizing and these type of odd sexual behaviors.
Let me say, in one of these more recent conversations she and I had, subsequent to the Bank Robbers and Serial Killers, she talked about Clyde putting the same revolver to her head that he'd used to kill Officer J.D. Tippit, which, of course, was used as a crime attributed to Lee Oswald, though he can't possibly have done it. He was already in the Texas theater by, 1:05, and this killing took place about 1:10. Aquila Clemens, who was seen across the street, said two men had killed Tippit and that neither of them looked like Oswald. In my impression, I'd have to go back and review the case in greater detail, is that one of them was larger and would have resembled WalterTabinski, and the other was shorter and would have resembled Clyde Forshaw. So, when Haley tells me he was putting the same revolver to his head that he had used to shoot J.D. Tippit, I believe her.
Gotcha. Hey, before we go too far astray from the Process Church connection, James, are you familiar with Peter Lavenda and his information that he said that the Process Church was incorporated by the same attorney in New Orleans that also incorporated that church, that Orthodox Catholic church that David Ferry and Guy Bannister and all those guys were members of?
Ed, I wouldn't feel comfortable going there myself because, this is just not familiar territory. I mean, there's very little that would surprise me any longer, frankly, about these cases. They're so complicated, so convoluted, they're so corrupt, and they have so many different dimensions and aspects, that it would not surprise me is the best I can do for you on this occasion.
Okay, I have my own interest in that topic, and I've heard Peter Lavenda. You familiar with Peter Lavenda?
That name is familiar to me, though I can't recall precisely why.
Okay, try and find it. He has. Ole, are you?
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, you guys, you should look up his stuff on YouTube. He's got some speeches on YouTube, and there's this really odd thing he mentioned because he lived right next door. You guys have heard of that Orthodox Catholic church that David Ferry was a bishop in, and Guy Bannister was also a bishop in.
Yeah, I didn't know about Bannister, but I know about the Ferry.
Yeah, me too.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. Take a look into that.
Ferry, I think, didn't he get kicked out because he was gay?
Yeah. That is the official story, at least.
Yeah, all I'm bringing up is this information that Peter Levenda comes up with, and I'm curious if I could get any confirmation of it, because to me it would be very interesting if that is accurate. We're trying to get a hold of him to be a guest on the show as well in the future. We haven't gotten through to him yet. Okay,
I'm the wrong person to answer that question.
But you wanted to ask Ole about John Lennon, and I guess Ole already answered that question. But Ole did a fair amount of work about the role of the apparent role of Tabinski and Clyde in relation to JFK. And this thing about Walter firing this weapon, which, as I recall, was it supposed to be a paralyzing dart, Ole, that he was firing?
Some kind of paralyzer.
Yeah,
I found it really odd to start with as well, but until I started studying the Zapruder film from a different angle, and then it all made sense to what she said.
Yeah, except to me, it seemed to me the trajectory just wasn't right. I mean, the shot to JFK's throat actually passed through the windshield and appears to have originated at the south end of the Triple Underpass. And, this appears to have been fired by an Air Force expert by the name of Jack Lawrence, and Jack even had a couple of small incisions in his face that David W. Mandick, MD, PhD, who was the leading expert on medical evidence, inferred had been from tiny shards of glass that hit his face as the bullet passed through the windshield. So I haven't seen evidence of the shot she attributes to Walter here, nor because of the relative positioning of Nellie Connolly and John Connolly and Jackie and Jack. It would have seemed to me to be a very difficult shot to take. So I have had difficulty reconciling what Haley has said about this, though she's repeatedly explained it to me and taken me to photographs. And I know the figure she's talking about in the Zapruder film, to whom you are alluding, and of whom she has spoken, numerous times.
But there's another possibility as well. I mean, he is there. He really looks like he has a weapon. He very much looks like he has a bulletproof vest, which is highly suspicious on that day, on that occasion. I mean, nobody knows for sure if he really fired. I mean, I think there were more shooters than shots fired this day. And but like I say, it's his story to her saying that he was positioned there, and that's exactly where this figure is in the Zapruder film.
I see there's a question from the chat room about whether the Jesuits were involved in the JFK assassination. I can only say, to the best of my knowledge, they were not. That you have to distinguish between the sponsors, the individuals and groups who wanted JFK out, principally to replace them with those of Lyndon Johnson, versus the facilitators who made it happen, versus the mechanics, the shooters, and their coordinators and supervisors on the ground. The sponsors, in the case of JFK, included the CIA. Jack was threatening to shatter it into 1,000 pieces. The Joint Chiefs. He had not invaded Cuba, contrary to the unanimous recommendation. He had signed an above-ground test ban treaty with the Soviets, contrary to the unanimous opposition. Now he's pulling our forces out of Vietnam, where they believed a stand had to be taken against the expansion of international godless communism. There were the anti-Castro Cubans, who wanted revenge. Really, their motive was purely retaliatory because they believed JFK had betrayed them at the Bay of Pigs. There were the mafia, of course, because Bobby was cracking down on organized crime, bringing more indictments and convictions than ever before in history, where they, just as Edgar had sex dossiers on all the members of Congress, the mafia had a sex dossier on Edgar, including compromising photographs of him with his close personal friend Clyde Tolson, so that Edgar was unable to even identify or acknowledge the existence of organized crime in the United States until the Joe Valachi hearings, when it was described with such detail that it was no longer politically possible for him to deny it. Then you have all the Eastern establishment surrounding the Fed.
because JFK had instructed the Department of the Treasury to print tens or even hundreds of millions of United States notes. I remember as a young Marine Corps officer holding one of these in my hand. It had a red embossed imprint rather than green, and it said United States note rather than Federal Reserve. Jack thought it was absurd that the American government should be paying interest to a consortium of private banks, which is the Fed, for printing the currency of the United States. There were the Texas oil men who were worried because he was threatening to cut the oil depletion allowance. And then there was Israel, because Jack was at loggerheads with David Ben-Gurion, who was the first PM of Israel and who wanted the development of nuclear weapons, which JFK opposed. The mechanics appear to have included, as I mentioned before, this deputy sheriff, actually by the name of Harry Weatherford, from the top of the county records building, appears to have fired a shot that hit Jack in the back. Then this Jack Lawrence, I've already mentioned, an Air Force expert, fired a shot that passed through the windshield, hit JFK in the throat. Then we have 3 shots that were fired from the Dow Tex by an anti-Castro Cuban by the name of Nestor Tony Escadro, who appears to, by the way, have been supervised by none other than George Herbert Walker Bush. If you want to read a fascinating article about this, did George H.W. Bush coordinate a JFK hit team by Richard Hook and me and veterans today? Then we got Roscoe White, to whom I have referred before, who is a Dallas police officer with ties to the CIA, who is on the grassy knoll, but who appears to have missed, although it was the shortest shot. He appears to have pulled it because Jackie would also have been hit. And then Frank Sturgis, firing from the north end of the triple underpass, fired the shot that hit JFK in the right temple, a frangible or exploding bullet. Jim Rothstein, who was unable to join us today, actually arrested him in New York when he came there to kill Marita Lawrence to ensure she didn't testify to the HSCA, and put a gun to his head as he came out to the apartment there. He made some remark to Sturgis about good shooting, and Sturgis acknowledged that he'd fired that shot that had killed JFK, that he did it because the Jack had betrayed them at the Bay of Pigs and was cavorting with beautiful women who were spies for foreign governments and therefore putting the nation's security at risk. And then finally, Malcolm Mack Wallace appears, from my research, to have been firing from the book depository building, not the alleged assassin's lair from which no shots were fired, but rather from the west side at John Connally, in the mistaken belief that it was Ralph Yarborough, the liberal Texas senator. Lyndon and Jack had a huge argument that morning where he tried to get Connally out and Yarborough in, but Jack overrode him on the ground that the chief executive of the state should ride with the chief executive of the United States, but there wasn't time to get the word out to the assassins. No shots were fired from that sixth-floor assassin's lair, but because the 3 fired from the Dow Tex, it was from the window of a broom closet for a uranium mining company that was owned by the CIA. It was a CIA asset. Were the only ones made with an unsilenced weapon, which appears to have been a Mannlicher Carcano, that the acoustics in Dooley Plaza are such that they claim that, those were the only 3 shots were fired, and of course there would turn out to have been 2 hits with 1 miss. That's the short take on the case. Before we go ahead, Ed.
Well, what does Haley have to say about Frank Sturgis being involved?
I don't know.
I don't think she knows her.
I don't know that Haley and I ever talked about Sturgis.
No.
Okay,
she knows a great deal about Walter and Clyde, but I never heard her and her own brother.
And also Charles Frederick Rogers.
Yeah, Charles Frederick Rogers, right?
She used to live together with him in I think Montreal or Toronto, the years after the assassination, 1967 or something like that.
She said that Clyde hated Charles Rogers. I know not why, unless it was because she had a relationship with him. But the 3 tramps who were escorted through Dealey Plaza have often been misidentified. But the first is Charles Rogers, whom the third, who is Chauncey Marvin Holt, knew as Richard Montoya. The second, of course, was Charles Harrelson, the father of the actor Woody Harrelson, who would wind up spending the rest of his life for the assassination of a federal judge using a high-powered rifle. And then the third, Chauncey Marvin Holt, who was very interesting guy. I got to know him personally, just as I did Madeline Duncan Brown, who was Lyndon Johnson's mistress, began an affair with him in 1948, bore him a son, Stephen, in 1950, and was actually present at the home of Clint Murchison the night before the assassination when a ratification meeting took place there that involved the presence of J. Edgar Hoover, Richard Nixon, John J. McCloy, Brown was the first name from Brown and Root Heavy Construction. McCloy was interesting to be there because when Lyndon created the Warren Commission to cover it up, he took the 2 civilian seats and gave one to Allen Dulles, former director of the CIA, whom JFK had removed, and the other to John J. McCloy, who'd actually been present at the ratification meeting. This just shows how treacherous all this was at the time. I mean, Lyndon was a totally unscrupulous person.
I'd like to go back to the 3 Tramps, okay? The first I ever heard of the 3 Tramps was when my friend, A.J. Weberman, wrote the book in 1977, Coup d'etat in America.
Right.
And he published a photo of the 3 Tramps, and it was also posted in Yipster Times or Overthrow magazine across the street over at Hippie headquarters. Now, before that, though, did anybody ever focus...
But Ed, his identifications were wrong. He thought, for example, the third of the Tramps was E. Howard Hunt. It was not E. Howard Hunt. It was Chauncey Marvin Holt. I organized a whole symposium in Dallas on the third of the 3 Tramps. I had his wife there. Chauncey was already deceased, but I had his wife there and his daughter, who proved very adept at using photographs from the family album, and she did superpositions, such that Jerry Rose, who was on the faculty for one of the state colleges in the New York college system, who edited the 3rd decade, later the 4th decade, rose at the end and said that while he'd always been convinced it was E. Howard Hunt, after this symposium, he was now reversing himself and realized it actually had been Chauncey Marvin Holt.
Okay, does AJ still say it was E. Howard Hunt or no?
Oh, I do not know the answer to that, but Lois Gibson, who was a celebrated forensic artist for the Houston Police Department, also identified them just as I have identified them. And, there's a discussion about them in the book, The Man on the Grassy Knoll, where her identification occurs. It's also in my book, Murder in Dealey Plaza, where I discuss it in a couple of places. But
well, let me ask another question. Was there any focus, though, on that photograph of the 3 Tramps before AJ's book?
Discussion of the 3 Tramps before?
Yeah. Was anybody saying, hey, these guys could be this? They were probably guilty. They were involved somehow or anything like that? Or was that the first time?
I'd have to go back and look at
Okay, I'm just curious because I was there when he wrote the book and I knew him then.
It was a congressman by the name of Thomas who winked at Lyndon when he was being sworn in for a job well done aboard Air Force One. In fact, the fact that Lyndon had everyone come forward for his swearing in, which was absolutely unnecessary under the Constitution, to get everyone away from the casket of JFK, which was in the back. And it was during the swearing in that his body appears to have been removed from the casket, put in a body bag, and stored in a secret compartment of the plane, so that when it landed at Andrews Air Force Base, it was offloaded and transported in a helicopter to Walter Reed, where the bullet fragments, these different shooters use different caliber bullets and so forth, were removed from the body, and then it was transported in a black hearse in a pinkish gray metal casket of the kind that was being used to bring bodies back from Vietnam, and it was inside a body bag to the back of the morgue at Bethesda Hospital, such that, for example, Gerald Custer, who was the radiation technician who actually took the x-rays at JFK, was heading upstairs with autopsy x-rays in order to have them developed in the company of 2 Secret Service agents. When you looked out the window in the front and saw the huge entourage with a gray Navy ambulance pulling up, and when Jackie was coming in the front of the building, and he was very puzzled because, of course, the body was already in the morgue and the autopsy had already begun.
Can I just mention about the 3 Tramps? You were interested in those?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
According to Haley, Charles Frederick Rogers, that she's later lived together with in Toronto, I think it was, he worked for the ONI, the Naval Intelligence, according to her. And it's said that he later killed his parents and chopped them up in pieces, put them in a fridge, and then disappeared out of history. But according to her, it was Clyde and Tabinski that took care of his parents. They were trying to get to him, and that they were the ones killing his parents.
Let me say, there's much more we could do about that. I want to say something else before we play the final clip, which is relatively short, from Haley, which is to do with John. One of Clyde's sons, Jay Forshaw, was a pilot at Buttonville Airport and an instructor, a pilot trainer. John was lured up there by Frank Stronach, who apparently was the CEO or owner of Magna International, who lured him up there to meet him, I think with promises he was going to give him a large amount of money to do research on the death of his father in George magazine. But while he was there meeting with Stronach, Clay and Clyde and Jay loaded John John's plane with high explosives. So this final clip we're about to hear, Jerry's got it set up, is related to that. So you want to catch this. It seems to me the whole world needs to know, too, what happened to the next generation here with the death of John F. Kennedy Jr. Jerry.
You there, Jerry?
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's start this, okay? Now, Jay Forshaw is an instructor of small planes, and he was in Buttonville. And he belonged, my understanding, to the COPA, which is the Canadian, it's a short form for Canadian Owners and Pilots Association. And he was the one that was the flight instructor in Buttonville at the time that JFK Jr. flew in. And I keep on saying the wrong plane. It's a Piper Saratoga aircraft that he had.
Okay.
Now, what was said, Clyde described exactly where he placed the super frac in the back luggage compartment. He lifted up this, like a sort of,
panel.
Sorry?
Panel, right?
And he said he placed it on the side. Now, the way he did it, as I remember vividly, because it was so shocking to me when he described this, was on the right side of the tail, right? So it was remote control detonated at the appropriate time. Anyway, they got in and out. Now, part of doing this, the son was going to get a helicopter, but at the time of this big argument, this guy there, the one, Mohammed, that's on trial right now in New York, and the Camiso from Italy, the Anthony Camiso, we're discussing getting a whole team of small, like the Sun training pilots to either take over small flights that go from major small cities. They go into the Buttonville Airport, the Island Airport here in Toronto, and there's various airlines from Porter to you name it. So they were going to steal these small planes and then be loaded with a suicide mission with all this either mini nukes, like I said, the cobalt bombs, or the super frac to take out buildings all over Canada and America. It was supposed to be coordinated at a certain time. And the son started yelling, hey, I want my helicopter, or we don't even talk anymore here. So I can't believe it. I listened to that talk about big takedown. Then I see the big heavy hitters, in their meeting. So they meet in open. Now get this with the Paul Forshaw. He went down for an arson he committed in 1995 in Villa de Lupo. And remember I told you where they met here in Mississauga was the Wolf's Howl. Lupa in Italian means wolf. Get that? Wolf, right? Mm-hmm. Villa is spelled Villa, second word Del, and then Lupo. Now it had a bad reputation for the arson, so the owners had the arson, collected the insurance, and now have redone the restaurant under just restaurant or Lupo Restaurant. Lupo Restaurant. Now the owners are Michael, Michael, and last name Mameli. The other owner was the chef and owner Julio Gonzalez, spelled Gulio, Gonzalez Gonzalez, Z, as you say it in America, Z-A-L-E. I think it's, what did I put? Gonzalez with a Z again.
It might be an S.
It might be an S, right. It's either a Z or an S. And hyphen Perini, P-E-R-I-N-I. And then there's also the previous owner was Vince, V-I-N-C-E, and then last name P-I-C-C-O-L-O. Okay, so they collected insurance. Now, when he did the time, he started laughing. He said, I just did a few, not even a year for that larceny, but he took out that restaurant, 5 businesses plus a gay bar, the best gay dance bar in Vancouver. He said there was arsons at in the basement that they put small trigger bomb devices so that when the arson blew, the person's remains, there wouldn't be nothing left. Nothing.
You mean they killed people in addition to saying the arson?
Of course. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, he only did something like a year, and then he's out again. But the big thing is they took down the Victoria, government hierarchy, and the RCMP put a sting in that same place, the Villa de Lupo. And that happened, I didn't put the date. Anyway, these are the guys that were taken down by the RCMP. Dave, D-A-V-E, last name Bassi, B-A-S-I, and Bob, B-O-B, and Burke, B-I-R-K. They were going on trial for, again, major corruption within the government. But they met right in this bar, so they put a sting right in the place. So they meet with the Italian mob and whatever. I can't believe this thing goes on and on. They meet right in the open with the Italian mobsters, these government officials that are all part of the take for illicit, government contracts of building contracts and construction contracts and on and on. So the problem is not just in Quebec, it's rampant all over Canada. So these guys have been doing this for eons. So that's what I got on the thread of.
Well, let me just say that I would recommend everyone listening to this show who cares about the issues we're addressing here, they should create 3 links. A link to bank robbers and serial killers, a link to radiofetzer.blogspot.com, and a link to this show on Ed Opperman's blog, and send them around to as many people as they know, because everyone, as Oli says, everyone in the world deserves to know what happened here. We're talking about, this is no small potatoes. This man has murdered all sorts of people, performs all sorts of arsons, bank robberies, knocked off ATMs, all-purpose criminal enterprise here. He and his sons, and I take it there are half a dozen of the sons, and the cousin, WalterTabinski, one of the biggest crime syndicate families ever of all time, probably responsible for more deaths than any other individuals in history, in particular Clyde and Walter. And I just say it's very important for all this information to get out to the world. Oli, would you agree with me in that recommendation?
I would totally agree, and I've got the information on my website as well, lightonconspiracies.com, that everybody is more than welcome to share.
Ed, are you there?
I think he dropped out.
We've had so many electronic problems. Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Sorry, I was talking away on mute. As soon as I heard Oli start talking, I had to interrupt.
We're on mute.
So I was interrupted, but I was on mute. Okay, no, I totally agree. Yeah, go ahead, my friend.
Okay, can I just say that these technical problems, just like Jim said, every single program, I've been on countless interviews, every single time you take up these subjects, there's technical problems, it shuts down, the telephone line shuts down, and also now it feels like it seems like they're attacking the YouTube channels as well, and even deletes the accounts for different radio shows online. So it's absolutely just standard.
Yeah, we're going through that right now. The Revolution Radio YouTube channel, they just had to put up a new channel just today because YouTube is declining all the new shows that they're putting up. So they just created a new Revolution Radio YouTube channel. I think you could find it by going to the old one, and there's a link to it. And also to this will be up on my YouTube channel, the Opperman Report YouTube channel. It'll be up on there tomorrow. We'll get to that. But we can find Jim Fetzer over at Veterans Today and Jim Fetzer Blogspot. And you can find Oli over at Conspiracy. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I was just going to say at radiofetzer.blogspot.com, yeah.
Radiofetzer.blogspot. And also Oli Demigard at lightonconspiracies.com. And on my blog, the Opperman Report, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find all your books, too, on Amazon. We'll put it up there, too, so everybody can get a hold of you that way. I just want to remind everybody, we're on Revolution Radio, the Opperman Report, freedomslips.com, listener-sponsored station. If you want to support this station, you got to visit the locate button. You got to visit the donate button and donate to the station and keep us going. Next week, Friday night, 5 p.m., I got coming up Diane Diamond. We're going to be talking about the Michael Jackson sexual molestation cases, and also to her other book she did on the White House party crashes, the White House D.C. White House gate crashes, party crashes, that were also clients of mine as well. But we'll be talking about that. After that, I got Mark Rudd coming up, who's one of the Weather Underground. And then I got Cynthia McKinney coming up, the former congressman who wanted to expose the 9/11 World Trade Center thing. And also to Cindy Sheehan, who was hung out next door to George Bush and made a lot of trouble for him. So we got all this stuff coming up. So guys, we only got about 20 minutes, not even, like 15 minutes left. What do you want to leave us with?
I just want to make a remark that neither of us are depressed. We're not suicidal. Our cars are fixed. And so just should anything happen to anyone, including Haley, then it will just confirm whatever we've said today. It will just confirm it. So as a kind of security thing, I'm just mentioning this.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Oli, and everyone should understand that. I mean, this is just startling information. When I first began doing radio talk shows and doing research on JFK and on 9/11 and so forth, I had no idea I could wind up in a situation of getting a whole lot of inside information about perhaps the greatest criminal family in history, and two of the most accomplished, if that's the appropriate word, serial killers in history. And, go through bank robbers and serial killers. Go through that. You'll see photographs. You'll listen to the interviews that I have archived there. Listen then to what Oli and I have to say in our conversation, which is archived both on his website and on mine, and which no doubt Ed is linking. And then listen again to this conversation with Ed, because we're talking about missing pieces of the major assassinations of the 20th century. And, up to and including John, which was a tragedy for us all. I was a huge fan of Bobby. I admired Jack. I thought Bobby was going to, take us forward as a nation. We've had nothing but regression. In fact, in the aftermath of the assassination of JFK, we had a succession of presidents who would never have held that office but for his death, including, of course, Lyndon Johnson, who is really the key player. If you want to learn more about Lyndon, try, for example, the book by Phil Johnson, LBJ, Mastermind of JFK's Assassination. But there are many more corroborating sources, including Madeline Duncan Brown's book, Texas in the Morning. Billy Saul Estes, a Texas legend, modestly named after himself, where Billy Saul was the Texas wheeler dealer who made fantastic sums of money for LBJ and for John Conley on scams, and where he told William Raymond, a French investigative reporter, that Lyndon had sent Cliff Carter, his chief administrative assistant, down to Dallas to make sure all the arrangements were in place for the assassination. He knew Cliff Carter. He knew Malcolm Wallace up close and personal.
Mac Wallace was Lyndon's personal hitman. He murdered a dozen people for Lyndon, including one of his own sisters. Further corroborations come from Barb McClellan, who worked at the law office of Ed Clark, who participated in the planning for the assassination. We have the new book by Roger Stone entitled The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Well, what's striking about Roger Stone is that he's a right-wing political operative. He was instrumental in getting George W. Bush elected down in Florida. He's very familiar to politicians on the right wing, and therefore he really gains access to a whole different audience than many others who might be otherwise skeptical about Lyndon's having played such a pivotal role. The fact of the matter is that he forced himself onto the ticket. He not only was not on Jack and Bobby's short list, he wasn't even on their long list. Jack had already extended the invitation to run as vice president to Stuart Symington of Missouri, but gave him overnight to think about it. And in the meanwhile, Bobby made a pro forma gesture of going to the Lyndon Johnson suite and extending the nomination to him, which he expected he would refuse because it would entail giving up his position, the powerful position of Senate Majority Leader. Instead, Lyndon leaped on it and was very manipulative and told Bobby that if he weren't on the ticket, he'd revealed that Jack had amorous relations with women who turned out to be East German spies, that he suffered from Addison's disease and would not live a long, healthy life, and that as majority leader, if he weren't on the ticket, he'd bottle up any legislative proposals sent down from the White House that would be dead on arrival. Jack and Bobby tried to figure out a way to get out of it, but they were stumped. And for the first and only time in his political career, Jack had to rescind, a significant offer to Stuart Symington. It was very embarrassing for him, but he was boxed in. Lyndon was using information that had been provided to him by J. Edgar Hoover, where Lyndon and Edward were extremely close. We also have confirmation from no less a figure than Jack Ruby, who was like the local arrangements chairman for the mob in Dallas. He, of course, ran the Carousel Club, and we all know that he eventually shot Lee Oswald, apparently being given no choice about it. It was rather like at the end of Once Upon a Time in America, where this mobster is given the choice of, shooting himself or climbing in the back of a garbage truck to be ground up. That's not much of a choice, but there it was. So Jack shot Lee. In fact, he said to reporters that if someone else had been vice president, this would never have happened. He pleaded with Earl Warren to take him back to Washington, but it fell on deaf ears. Earl had been seduced by Lyndon Johnson, who was a master at manipulating men by telling him, threatening him that his country needed him and that it was they had to make it clear to the world that Lee Oswald was a lone assassin because, and I believe he actually said this to Warren, they know that it actually traced back to Fidel Castro and the Soviet Union. But if the truth came out that 30 or 40 million Americans would die in a nuclear war, so that he also, ridiculed Warren for being unable to get his pudgy body back into his World War II military uniform, but that his commander-in-chief needed him. And Warren, abdicated his proper role. I mean, think about it. Here you have the Chief Justice of the United States, where if there'd actually been a prosecution of anyone for the death of JFK, that it would have eventually worked its way up to the Supreme Court. But the Chief Justice of the court had already been compromised by his participation in the investigation. There's no doubt that Lee Oswald was innocent of the crime. There are multiple indications of his having been framed for the position, including the backyard photographs. Jim Mars and I did a study of the backyard photographs you can find online entitled "Framing the Patsy: The Case of Lee Harvey Oswald," where we went through proof after proof after proof.
Are you saying that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do it? The Warren Commission is wrong?
Nice one, Ed. Nice one.
Somebody had to do it sooner or later, right?
It's astounding that anyone today should continue to believe such palpable nonsense. But of course, it's also true for the 9/11 Commission report. The whole thing was a staged event. It involved collusion between the CIA and the neocons in the Department of Defense and the Mossad. It was intended to instill fear into the American people to support a transformation of American foreign policy from one in which we never attacked any nation that hadn't attacked us first into an aggressor nation where we invaded Afghanistan within 3 weeks of 9/11. And then, of course, a couple of years later, Iraq. And the whole thing was contrived, all these lies about Saddam Hussein having had something to do with 9/11, having been in cahoots with Osama bin Laden, Iraq being in collusion with al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden actually was our man in Afghanistan. He was instrumental in getting the Stinger missiles into the hands of the resistance movement that shot down all those Soviet helicopters and planes and forced the Soviets to withdraw from Afghanistan. Osama said when he was first asked about 9/11 that he'd had nothing to do with it, that while he was opposed to the stationing of American forces in Saudi Arabia, the home of Mecca and Medina, the two most holy sites in Islam, that there appeared to be a government within the government that wanted to blame this on Muslims, that it was contrary to the tenets of the Koran to murder innocent women and children. No less an authority than William Jefferson Clinton said very strikingly similar things, to wit that there's a government within the government and that he did not control it. Eventually, when our present president found himself in deep political trouble because of controversy over his birth certificate, because he had not closed Guantanamo, because there were troops stationed in Pakistan, they resurrected Osama bin Laden, who actually had died in Afghanistan on or about 15 December 2001. He was buried in an unmarked grave in accordance with Muslim tradition. Even Fox News reported his death. You can find the report online on 26 December. There have been articles published about it. Dick Kollerstrom, a historian of science and student of 9/11, has published Osama bin Laden 1947 to 2001. You can find that. David Ray Griffin, the leading expert on 9/11, has published 10 books about it, including Osama bin Laden, Dead or Alive, in which he marshals the evidence. But in 2011, it was so useful to Barack Obama that they resurrected Osama bin Laden, performed a fake attack on a compound in Pakistan. No one there had ever seen Osama bin Laden for the obvious reason that he hadn't been there. We were shown a photograph of Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Barack Obama all intensely watching what was presumably a big screen event, television, as the event went down live, until Leon Panetta, then the director of the CIA, admitted that there'd been no live coverage of the event for the first 25 minutes, which was the entire duration of the raid. Most of the SEALs who the body was allegedly dumped in the ocean in accordance with Muslim tradition, but it isn't, because, then the fish and crustaceans and sharks can nibble at the bodies. It's very disrespectful of the bodies. Instead, what was going on was massive duplicity, lies, lies, lies. And in the film Zero Dark 30, we got a resurrection of the whole fantastic story. I published a piece everyone might want to read entitled Zero Dark 30, The Deeper, Darker Truths, in which I tie all these loose ends together. But it swept the question of Obama's birth certificate off the front page. They claimed that the tip had come about the location of Osama from Guantanamo. So, gee, aren't we glad it's open? He used troops stationed in Pakistan. Gee, aren't we glad they were stationed there after all? The whole thing was an elaborate charade. But then we're getting nothing but one lie after another from the American government. Since 9/11, nothing has been going right for this nation. We haven't won a single war in which we have engaged. Barack Obama has sent American military forces into 17 different countries in Africa alone. The country is falling apart at the seams. Our economy is crumbling. This was a U.S. intervention in the Ukraine. We have an undersecretary acknowledging that $5 billion was invested to stir up trouble in the Ukraine. They imported Soviet-made weapons to deliberately fire into protesters in order to support the claim that Russians had done it when Russians had nothing to do with it. Vladimir Putin has been the one sole rational statesman astride the world trying to bring about peaceful negotiations, including in Syria, where the chemical attacks did not come from the Assad government, but appear to have been provided to the rebels by Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia. The whole thing is a charade. And, of course, we have the ongoing diplomatic issues with Iran, which are quite frankly absurd, because our own intelligence agencies, all 16 of them, converged in the conclusion in 2007 that the Iranians were not pursuing a nuclear weapons program, a conclusion they reaffirmed in 2011. It's Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis who are stirring up the trouble in the Middle East. Iran is a peace-loving country, hasn't invaded any other country for 300 years, signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, has allowed inspectors. Israel has a vast stockpile of chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, which it's never declared, has not signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, will not allow inspectors. There's a problem in the Middle East, but it has nothing to do with Iran and everything to do with our gallant ally, Israel, where finally, we're reaching the point where strategic level thinkers in the American government are reassessing whether our historic strategic alliance with Israel is good or bad, because the Israelis act in their own best interest. Just to give you an illustration, the NSA program.
We only got 2 minutes left.
You got it. I'll give you 30 seconds. 30 seconds, Ed, and it's all yours. Edward Snowden exposed this vast NSA surveillance program, which the government claims was initiated after 9/11, but actually it was introduced in February, 7 months before. And by agreement, all of our raw NSA intelligence data goes directly to Israel. It turns out that Israel has an NSA satellite facility in Jerusalem, so that they have access to all of our intelligence agencies, all of our intelligence data. Stu Webb suggests that includes even our missile launch codes. No other nation ought to share any intelligence data with the United States unless they wanted to go directly to Israel. There are problems in the world, but they aren't caused by Iran or Syria or Russia. They come from a completely different source.
I would agree with about 99% of that, okay? And you're right. The same guys who were assassinating JFK back then are still around today. They're still in power today and doing nothing but causing havoc. But we're going to have to wrap it up real quick. Oli, what last words do you have to say? Can you get me that tranquilizer dart?
I just want to say I really honor Haley Otis for her enormous courage and stamina that she's been doing for so many years, trying to reveal the truth. And I wish her all the very best. That's about it.
I want to
thank you for hosting this program, and it's magnificent of you to do that.
Thank you, James Fetzer, for coming on. James Fetzer on Veterans Today. You can find him over there. Always Demogod. You can find him on lightonconspiracies.com. I'm going to have links to all their stuff, their websites, and everything on my blog. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you Friday night.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat asses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. You know, the shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out. Not me. Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com.
Finder of lost children and missing persons. Monique Lassan. Surveillance civil and criminal investigations. I investigate.
No, I am the chosen one.
Do not underestimate the power of good, and do not dismiss the strength of the child.
Yes, every Wednesday evening on Revolution Radio, come join our very own I-Investigatrix, Monique Lassan, with her private I-X-Files.
So you're the finder of lost children?
Private I-X-Files, every Wednesday from 10 to midnight Eastern, Studio B, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
I realize it's very hard for you to take in. But it's your destiny to find the golden child.